Chapter 113. The explosion didn't last long, but the rocks, planks, sand, and debris that were tossed into the air covered the entire field. A giant crater was formed in the middle of the field. Ding Meng lay half dead in the crater. He had been blasted into a black man, and his original appearance couldn't be seen from his body. When he saw Ruo Lan running over, panting, he immediately got up and yelled, "Isn't this a battle armor? Why did it self-destruct?" Ruo Lan became even angrier. "Do you know that if we weren't in the battlecraft combat world, you would have been blown to pieces by now?" Ding Meng was covered in dust like a dog, and black smoke was coming out of his mouth. "What happened?" Ruo Lan panted heavily, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This is the first time I've seen someone make a battle armor explode on their first try," Ding Meng argued. "I didn't give the command to self-destruct. It blew itself up." Ruo Lan shook her head helplessly. "There's only one possibility. The Black Rock Knight has a capacity of 60,000 points. If your origin energy conversion exceeds this threshold, the battle armor will automatically disintegrate. In order to prevent it from falling into enemy hands, the system will automatically activate the self-destruct command." Ding Meng also shook his head. "This means that the quality of the battle armor isn't good enough. It can't hold up at 60,000 points. Only 60,000 points." Ruo Lan was so angry that she laughed. "I'm already giving phase to the origin energy user by setting it at 60,000 points. Which origin energy user can instantly explode with 60,000 points of combat power? Can someone with 60,000 points of combat power still be considered an origin energy user? That seems to be the case." Ding Meng scratched his head and said, "But according to your logic, you shouldn't have let me use this Black Rock Knight. You should have given me a higher level battle armor, or set the threshold higher." Ruo Lan was so angry at Ding Meng's ignorance that she shouted, "Do you think the threshold is set by my mouth? Let me tell you, the prototype of this Black Rock Knight is the Pioneer first generation. The military has modified it 8 or 9 times. The maximum critical value is only 42,000 points. After my modifications, it's already extremely difficult to increase it to 60,000 points. What else do you want?" Ding Meng's eyelids drooped. "Isn't there a more advanced armor?" Rulin said helplessly. "The military only provided a few for this mission, and these are the better ones. Claude's Thunder Swallow is only 40,000 points. Why don't you try swapping?" Ding Meng muttered, sigh. "These are all junk for us to use." "Junk?" Rulin jumped up again. "Do you know how much this Black Rock Knight costs?" "How much?" Ding Meng was curious. Ruo Lan slowly extended 4 fingers and looked at him with contempt. Ding Meng hesitated. 400,000 star coins? 400,000? Rulin glared at him. "You can't even buy half a helmet with 400,000 star coins. The special crystal processors used in the armor are mostly imported from the Federation. The Imperium has almost no technology in this area." Ding Meng said, "Do you want 4 million? Rulin took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. 4 million is only enough to buy half an artificial silver core stone, and the lowest quality one. Ding Meng was also angry. Then 40 million should be enough, right? Rulin wanted to smash his head with a hammer. Source core, silver core stone, and crystal processor. These 3 things add up to more than 40 million star coins. Let me tell you the truth. The cost of this Black Rock Knight is 400 million star coins." Ding Meng was immediately amused. He couldn't say anything else. Seeing him like this, Rulin felt a little better. "Now you know what I'm capable of. Fortunately, you're still able to do this in the server. If you were in the real world, then congratulations. You didn't go bankrupt. You're a billionaire." Ding Meng couldn't help but slap his thigh. "It's really King expensive." "It's not that expensive." Rulin copied him and lowered her eyelids. This time, it was Ding Meng's turn to jump up. "This isn't expensive?" "Of course not." Rulin waved her hand, and the hologram appeared in front of her again. "Your combat ability was 15,000 points during the test, but just now, it exceeded 60,000 points. This means that the armor has directly increased your combat ability by 4 times, right?" Ding Meng said, "That's about right." Rulin began to calculate on the screen. A combat ability of 60,000 points has long since surpassed that of a mid-level Origin Energy warrior. It usually takes an ordinary person 20 to 30 years to cultivate from the Origin Energy user stage to the mid-level Origin Energy warrior stage. During this time, you'll have to consume enhancement products, use sensory pods, nutrition pods, purchase cultivation techniques, equipment, and so on. This doesn't even include the cost of studying in various places. There's also the cost of food, clothing, housing, and transportation for the next 20 to 30 years. Even including the cost of picking up girls, finding a wife, and having children, all of this easily adds up to a few 100 million star coins. Don't you think it's expensive? This. Ding Meng was dumbfounded by her powerful logic and calculation ability. You're really comparable to Little Rascal? What? Ruolin was furious. Are you saying I'm Little Rascal? No. Ding Meng hurriedly waved his hands. What I'm saying is that you're right. It's not expensive. It really wasn't expensive. He had experienced it himself. The cultivation of Origin Energy users was like a bottomless pit. Basically, it was just piling up money. From a time perspective, this armor could save Origin Energy users a few decades of time. A few decades wasn't a short time. Even if one had to carry bricks, they could carry a few million pieces. Even if it cost 10 tokens per piece, that was still quite a sum. The two of them argued back and forth on the field. To put it bluntly, it was just that Ding Meng's Origin Energy was relatively too strong for the Black Lava Knight to handle. Ruolin herself found it quite funny. Other armor users would want their partners to be as strong as possible, but her partner was so strong that he could make the armor explode on his first try. If word of this got out, no one would believe it. They would definitely think that she was bragging. Don't tell me that Second Lieutenant would and the others won't provide any other armor. Ding Meng was very unwilling to give up. It's fine if it's broken, as long as it's better than the Black Lava Knight. You have to understand the space station. Planet TT-12 is a peripheral planet, and the official ration is pitifully low. The fact that they're giving us students a few broken armors is all because of Colonel Foam. We'll just have to make do with it. Ruolin was also a little helpless. Forget it. You should familiarize yourself with the operation. I'll go guide Chloe. Fortunately, this is a good server. As soon as she finished speaking, another armor box with the Black Lava Knight icon appeared on the ground. Wait. Ding Meng hurriedly pulled her back. What if I accidentally exploded again when I practice? Ruolin looked at him as if he was a freak. After a long time, she sighed. Forget it. I'll give you the command. If you want to continue exploding, just summon another one. Ding Meng was overjoyed. I can summon it indefinitely? Of course. Ruolin had a strange look on her face. The power of the Kajia server is beyond your imagination. You should hurry up and practice the armor. If you can reach 20% proficiency before you leave, I'll think you're pretty good. Armor proficiency was an extremely important indicator to evaluate the level of the pilot. The reason why the Black Lava Knight had 5 levels of easy, normal, difficult, hell, and extreme was actually a corresponding symbol of proficiency. Easy mode was actually 20% proficiency, which meant that the pilot was completely familiar with the basic operations of the armor. Normal mode was 40% proficiency, which meant that the pilot had a good grasp of most of the armor's functions. Difficult mode was 60% proficiency, which was not a passing level. It meant that the pilot had completely integrated into the armor, truly becoming one with the armor. Hell mode's 80% proficiency could no longer be described as a standard. It was a completely different realm. The pilot could perform actions that could not be done in the usual operation introduction of the armor. When extended to actual combat, the performance of the armor had exceeded the system's evaluation of the armor. As for extreme mode's 100% proficiency, it was impossible to reach that level without immersing oneself in the same armor for decades and experiencing thousands of battles. However, this was also very contradictory, because after a few decades, even the most incompetent Origin ability users had greatly improved their strength. They no longer needed the low-quality armor from back then and would inevitably use higher-quality substitutes. Thus, the Warframe Masters would often tease the soldiers who had reached 100% proficiency, You shouldn't have a wife. You should have a certain type of armor as your true love. For beginners, even 20% proficiency required a scientific method and a few months of gradual practice. How long was it until the mission began? Only a freak like Ding Meng, and because he was in the Kijia server, Ruolin defined Ding Meng as a Warframe genius. If he could really reach 20% proficiency, she was sure that she would choose Ding Meng as her lifelong Warframe master partner. Also, I'll send you the virtual memory of the armor types and other information in a moment. You can slowly learn when you're tired of training. Ruolin left this sentence and turned into light and floated away. She did not expect a brute like Ding Meng to settle down and learn knowledge and culture. In fact, Ding Meng did not have such an idea. Ding Meng's real idea was to cheat. Now that he was in the Kajia server, it was best not to disturb Little Rascal. He would save the virtual memory first and then wake Little Rascal up in the sensor cabin after leaving the server. Little Rascal's replication ability was very powerful. After copying everything, it would be directly injected into the consciousness space and completely absorbed in one gulp. The only condition for doing this was that it required a high level of brain development. It required a strong foundation of telekinesis, and that would require him to cultivate the Diamond Astral Technique. However, the Diamond Astral Technique was not convenient to meditate in the server. Thinking of this, Ding Meng felt depressed. When would he be able to successfully construct the sixth origin? It was like there was a delicious and nutritious loaf of bread in front of you. You couldn't eat it all at once, nor could you leave it uneaten. You had to take a long time to eat it bit by bit without being disturbed by others. This feeling was really frustrating. Chapter 114. Ding Meng was not the only one who was anxious. Claus was also having a headache. In fact, he knew that before the mission began, he had the opportunity to operate the Warframe. However, operating in the Battlecraft combat world and operating it in the Superconductor Academy's intranet were two completely different things. The school's intranet was also connected to the International Space Network. He knew the massive amount of information about the Warframe in the server like the back of his hand. He knew the steps to follow, which functions to use in which environment, what actions to take in which situation. He knew it all by heart. However, the school's virtual system did not have the powerful energy of the inverse crystal in the server. It could simulate 100% realism. To put it simply, in the school, you could familiarize yourself with all kinds of Warframes and their detailed features, but you could not construct a virtual clone that was exactly the same as your data. This meant that you were not really operating the Warframe. Again, strength was one thing, but adaptability was another. Claus did not have an overpowered ability like telekinesis, so after entering the Warframe for 5 minutes, he did not move at all. He was already confused by the various information flows inside the Warframe. It was not easy for him to adapt a little, but his first step was unstable and he almost fell to the ground. This was already not bad. It was all thanks to his usual studies in school that he knew how to adjust himself. He did not know how much time had passed until he could run skillfully. Anyway, Ruolin had been sitting at the side of the field waiting for him in boredom. Ruolin didn't dare to provoke Claus. Ding Meng had only used 10 minutes to adjust the mode to hard mode and run all over the world. Claus, on the other hand, had spent almost 4 to 5 hours to barely stand firm in easy mode. Comparisons were not to be made between people. Once you did, you would be pissed to death, especially when it came to talent. No matter how much you learned or taught, it was useless. It could only be seen through actual operation. Of course, you could not blame Claus for being too weak. It was completely Ding Meng who was too abnormal. At this time, Ruolin also knew that Claus could not bring the real Thunder Swallow for this mission. Only Ding Meng could take the Blackstone Knight. Users at the level of origin ability users could not be called armored soldiers. They also needed to be certified by the Warframe organization. The military would not allow non-armored soldiers to carry the Warframe on missions. However, the Blackstone Knight and Thunder Swallow had served for many years and could no longer meet the needs of the escalating war. They had long retired from the frontline battlefield. The real Blackstone Knight in the space station could not be more broken. If Elder Feng valued talent, he should make an exception and let the team take it. Thinking of this, Ruolan decided to submit a report and a plan to the system. She had to prepare, maintain, and modify the armor. Time was indeed tight. By the time she was done, 2.5 days had passed. Ruolan once again entered the space combat world. She did not care about the progress of the other members, but she was still quite concerned about Ding Meng and Claws. Many Warframe masters and armored soldiers had a very close relationship. They were like comrades, and those who had worked together for many years were more like good friends. Although they specialized in different fields, they had always been learning from each other and improving together. Claus's progress was not very satisfactory. His current proficiency level was 8%, and he could only jog in easy mode. Forget it. I'll go and see Ding Meng. Ruolan sighed helplessly. When her figure appeared in the space where Ding Meng was, she suddenly realized that the spaceport field had disappeared. What happened? Ruolan looked around in shock. I didn't make a mistake in the teleportation. What happened? The originally flat and vast sports field had become extremely dilapidated. There were potholes everywhere, and countless round pits were emitting black smoke. The entire sports field had been destroyed beyond recognition. It was simply billowing smoke, just like a battlefield where artillery fire had reached the sky. The Black Rock Knight was still there, but every minute he would turn to a ball of light and then explode. Less than 10 seconds after the explosion, he would appear again. He would either fly up into the sky and explode, or he would perform a sword dance and explode on the spot. He would explode and explode again. In short, he would explode and explode everywhere. Ruolan was furious. She shouted, "Are you addicted to self-destructing?" With a whoosh, the Black Rock Knight suddenly floated down from the sky. His flying boots shot out long, crystal flames, but the entire armor was still floating in the air. Ding Meng's voice came down. "I'm trying to train as close to the critical point as possible." It turned out that while Ruolan was away, Ding Meng had gradually figured out the rules of training. First, he would use one origin to practice the basic movements in easy mode. This was very easy. Then, he would slowly upgrade to normal and hard mode. It was very difficult to use only one origin to practice hard mode. Even lifting 2 alloy swords was very difficult. Of course, Ding Meng wasn't in a hurry to succeed. He waited until the basic movements were standardized before using the second origin to start from easy mode. With this foundation, he quickly learned the difficult movements: jump, dodge, sprint, charge, roll, somersault leap, slam, Thomas spin, soaring back spin. Finally, he used 3 origins to activate hard mode. No matter how Ding Meng controlled his origin energy, the armor couldn't last more than a minute in hard mode. It was bound to explode. Ding Meng lowered his origin energy to 2 origins and chose Hell mode. You dare use Hell mode? Ruolan clearly didn't believe him. However, when she saw Ding Meng hovering in the air, it was obvious that he had mastered flying techniques. In theory, it was possible for him to use Hell mode. The scene of the explosion was proof of this. Hell mode was nothing more than an increase in the conversion efficiency of the origin energy core. The soldier's origin energy was injected into the origin energy core and converted into various types of energy, such as kinetic energy, crystalline energy, electrical energy, thermal energy, electromagnetic energy, force fields. In any case, it wasn't the purest form of origin energy. If Ding Meng could accurately control the origin energy core, then he could indeed use Hell mode. Ruolan calculated as she opened her screen to check the information. Then, she stood in place petrified. The system showed that Ding Meng's proficiency with the Blackstone Knights was 42, 88%. This, Ruolan was dumbfounded. What's wrong? Ding Meng had already descended from the sky. Ruolan looked at him, her expression as if she was looking at a humanoid monster. Ding Meng also saw the 42, 88% on the screen. He sighed slightly. The progress is still slow. It's only 42, 88%. Only 42, 88%? Ruolan stared at him. She didn't want to provoke Ding Meng. This was already the speed of a genius. If she explained it in detail, she was afraid that Ding Meng would become arrogant and careless. At this time, Second Lieutenant Wood's voice suddenly came from above. Students, please immediately stop all your activities in the Battlecraft combat world. After 10 minutes, you will automatically be logged out of the Kajia server. Please gather on the 12th floor. We are about to depart. Ding Meng was somewhat dispirited. The time he had to cultivate was still too short. If he was given a few more days, he was confident that he could break through 50%. Half an hour later, Ding Meng and the others once again arrived at the conference room on the 12th floor. Looking through the window, they could still see the beautiful and colorful scenery of the Listen Academy. However, unlike last time, Elder Feng didn't appear here. Aside from Second Lieutenant Wood, there were two other unfamiliar soldiers at the conference table. Judging from the insignias on their uniforms, one was a sergeant and the other was a sergeant. Their ranks were relatively low. When they saw the group enter, the two soldiers took the initiative to stand up and salute them. The sergeant was tall and his voice was sonorous and powerful. Hello, students. My name is Ji Ming. My mission is to transport you to the destination. This self-introduction was very strange. Fortunately, the interstellar map was opened on the table and Wood was already explaining. Students, please take a look. We have already set off from the International Space Station of planet TT-12 and are flying to Nebula TCP-121. A curved line of light was very clearly marked on the three-dimensional map, and Nebula TCP-121 was like a small vortex in space. There were countless quasars, meteorite belts, dust clouds. Wait. Xing, he couldn't help but shout. Mr. Second Lieutenant, you said that we have already set off. Yes. Wood smiled slightly and then pressed the wrist device. At this time, the illusion on the window of the conference room completely changed. Everyone could clearly see that outside was the magnificent scene of the space station of planet TT-12. They seemed to be in a spaceship. The spaceship had already left the entrance and was slowly flying away from the space station. There were all kinds of ships of all sizes accompanying it. Ji Ming said in a deep voice, Students, we are now in the lead mothership of the Norse Empire's Interstellar Patrol Fleet, NX-3 DDT-51. Due to the armistice agreement between our Empire and the Holy Grail Federation, our patrol fleet cannot leave the Empire's jurisdiction without authorization from the higher-ups of the military. Therefore, our fleet can only transport you to the edge of Nebula TCP-121. Then, Anvil's transport ship will send you to the designated route. Finally, I will be responsible for taking everyone to the destination. As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes fell on Chu Shaoqing. Everyone had the same thought. The Chu family had close ties with the military. It seemed that this time they had invested a lot. Miss Chu was also determined to join the army as soon as possible. This mission was even more important. Seeing that no one said anything, the sergeant slowly stood up. He was short and strong, with a dark complexion. There was a gloomy aura between his eyebrows, giving people a particularly cold feeling. It was obvious that this person had definitely been on the battlefield. Students, from now on, your identities are no longer students. You are members of the same team and also reserve members of the military. I will follow everyone on this mission and cooperate with everyone to ensure everyone's safety to the greatest extent. My name is Chengda. Please advise me. Ding Ming suddenly had a strange feeling because his telekinesis vision was opened at this moment. The strength of this Sergeant Chang did not seem to be very good. The energy fluctuations did not seem to reach the level of a source warrior. How could he ensure everyone's safety? However, one cannot judge a book by its cover. Since he was the only one sent by the military, there must be a reason. Chu Shaoqing suddenly clapped her hands and said with a smile, Everyone, I was the one who invited you. Now that everyone is set off, it's time for me to fulfill my promise. Everyone, follow me to our group's transport ship. Chapter 115. Ding Ming had actually seen the Norse Empire's patrol fleet before. The leading mothership was the War Elephant. Its specifications were higher than Chu Yifeng's Sea Sky Pole Island. In addition, The fleet consisted of 4 Skywalker assault ships, 8 Falcon Dragon assault ships, 12 Tiger Fong frigates, and 2 Honga supply ships. From the configuration of the fleet, it could be seen that this fleet was mainly for defense. After all, its main duty was to protect the Empire's borders. Although the entire fleet was only about 20 ships and could not be compared to the large fleets on the front line, the ships, machines, armor teams, and other units below the ship level were all hidden in the internal space of the large warships. They would only be released upon receiving orders. Anvil Corporation's transport ship was docked inside the mothership. This honeycomb transport ship was 6 times the size of the Swordfish. Inside the honeycomb was a Songqing exploration spaceship. This spaceship was shaped like an olive, like a smooth and round fruit. Although its design looked simple, its various system configurations were much better than the Swordfish's. This kind of exploration spaceship was most suitable for shuttling in the depths of a universe where no one cared about. Its biggest advantage was its speed, agility, and excellent defense. The Empire had discovered a large number of inverse source crystals in the Fertile Chalk system, and the Songqing spaceship played an important role. It was not until Ding Meng boarded this spaceship that he had a new understanding of Chu Shaoqing. In the past, when he was in the Qingzi Dojo and Liston Academy, people always talked about the Chu family. Now it seemed that the Chu family was really impressive. At least the Chu family was really rich to be able to afford a spaceship like the Songqing. Compared to the rich families in the Empire, Ding Meng still did not know how rich the Chu family was. In any case, compared to Chu Shaoqing, Ding Meng did not even have the qualifications to be a beggar. Therefore, in the supply hall, the travel equipment provided by Anvil Corporation was quite luxurious. First was the Aquamarine Light Armor. This was a light individual armor made of nanomaterials and highly polymerized metals. It was as light and convenient as a bodysuit. It had many advanced functions and was especially suitable for complex terrain. Its most commendable feature was its power system. Whether it was light energy, heat energy, crystal energy, or electricity, as long as it was energy, it could be used. It could be fully charged, stored, and recycled. Next was the Norse Empire's unique Patriot Type 6 multi-function wristwatch. It included long-distance real-time projection, high-precision micron positioning, short-thread quantum communication, medium and long-thread ion transmission, composite database, the ultra-compressed anti-gravity warp collar backpack produced by Anvil Corporation. This thing couldn't be compared to storage-type subspace treasures, but it could hold enough units. At the very least, it could hold rescue, medical, and exploration tools. Swap particle mini machine gun, capacity, 500T, highly polymerized ion energy pistol, capacity, 80T, IT-type wave energy bomb 3. In fact, the need for these weapons was not that strong because these things did not pose much of a threat to them. If there was an enemy, they would not be of much use. 50 super polymerized nutrient supply, 5,000 plus decars, 20 healing mixtures, 5 blood-generating mixtures, and 2 steel mixtures. These are the standard equipment given to each person. However, when he saw the high-end and exquisite nutrient solution box, Randy could not help but ask, "What are these for?" 55,000 decars nutrient solutions should be enough for 7 to 8 months, right? There are also healing mixtures and steel mixtures. Are we going to war? This was also the question on everyone's mind. Fortunately, Chengda took the initiative to explain. Salvaging is not an easy task. If we are successful, we may be done in a few days. If we are unable to find the remains of the victims, it is normal to spend 3 to 5 months. The healing mixtures and strengthening mixtures are also to prevent accidents. When we go out, our own safety is always the priority. It is always right to be well prepared. To put it bluntly, this group of people were all proud and arrogant students. The military had to face a lot of pressure to send them out. Try changing to another team? Would they receive such treatment? The cost of these equipment would not be less than 300,000 star credits. Of course, Chengda would not say this out loud. After all, he was also given a set. After receiving the standard equipment, Chu Shaoqing went to the resting area to talk to the people one by one. Ding Ming did not know what exactly they talked about, but he was the last person Chu Xiaoqing talked to. Ding Ming. Chu Xiaoqing sat down beside him. Thank you for participating this time. Ding Ming thought to himself, I actually did not want to participate, but the pursuers have already infiltrated planet TT-12. I have to leave even if I don't want to. Chu Xiaoqing's impression of Ding Ming was still at the stage when he was enlisted in Academy. She sighed slightly and said, I know that you and Sister Man's financial situation is not very good. So once this mission is successfully completed, I personally hope to compensate you for some of your cultivation expenses. Ding Ming frowned as if he wanted to ask something, but in the end, he curled his lips and did not say anything. Chu Xiaoqing clearly misunderstood and corrected herself. Ding Ming, you're so strong, so I'm sure the difficulties you face in your cultivation will not be small. If you have any difficulties, please tell me. I'll definitely help you if I can. Ding Ming was most interested in the topic of cultivation. By the way, Miss Chu, do you have a sword? It would be best if it could withstand the infusion of origin energy. Chu Xiaoqing smiled again. I know that you're a teacher Zhao student and are passionate about swordsmanship, but forgive me for being blunt, but an ancient sword is not very useful in battle. She tried to be as tactful as possible, but how could Ding Ming not understand? Don't think that Zhao Yu's speech at the Lister Academy was full of praise for swords. In reality, in this era, swords were of little use. Origin, energy, and technology were like two huge mountains in front of you. Well, that comparison would be too vertical. If you were to compare it horizontally, which one of the alloy blades produced by technology would not be better than your ancient sword? Even in the Kajia server, Ruo Lan was unable to get Ding Ming an ancient sword that met the standards. The reason Ding Ming wanted an ancient sword was because of the two sword techniques that Zhao Yu had taught him. He had only casually looked at them, but ever since he could use telekinesis to wield a sword, these two sword techniques were like Pandora's box that had been opened. They had an endless attraction to him. The more he studied them, the more he felt that they were unfathomable, and the more he practiced them, the more interested he became. Ancient sword techniques might be considered antiques in the era of origin energy, only suitable for appreciation and not practice, but no one could deny their existence. Their existence was reasonable, and reasonable meant that it was possible. Since it was possible, why not give it a try? What if it was possible to master it? Ding Ming's train of thought was actually influenced by Little Rascal. The harder it was, the more we had to try. The stronger others were, the stronger we had to become. The more dangerous the environment was, the more we had to survive. Our ultimate goal was to defy the heavens, create miracles, and eliminate all impossibilities. Faced with Ding Ming's insistence, Chu Xiaoqing's expression seemed to have made a great decision. She turned her head and said, Unit 093, go and get it. Yes, Miss Chu. The staff on the side immediately went to the warehouse. Item 093 was quickly delivered. In front of Ding Ming was a long and narrow box with an ancient style. The material was very ordinary. It seemed to be made of animal skin, and there was nothing special about it. After opening the box, it was indeed an ancient sword. The scabbard was black, the mouth was square, the hilt was short, and the whole body was slender and straight. It was no different from the wooden sword that teacher Zhao Yu used in school. This was the most standard ancient sword. Ding Ming slowly took out the sword and held it in front of his chest, as if he was feeling it. Strangely enough, although the sword looked light, it was not light at all. He had to slightly circulate his origin energy to be able to lift it. This sword definitely weighed more than 50 pounds. Of course, with Ding Ming's strength, this was not a problem. Looking at his posture, Chu Xiaoqing could not help but say, It seems that this sword suits you. Ding Ming was curious. Oh, is there a story behind this sword? Chu Xiaoqing's gaze fell into the distance, as if she was reminiscing about the past. My third brother loved this sword very much when he was alive. Unfortunately, he was not an origin energy user and could not even lift it. Therefore, it was just sitting there. Since you can lift it, I might as well give it to you. Who knows, it might actually be useful in your hands. Seeing her sad expression, Ding Meng did not ask any more questions. With a clang, he pulled the sword out of the scabbard. A dark golden light came into view. The color of this sword was exactly the same as the T-shaped claw knife. The light of the sword was like a pool of autumn water, with its own cold sharpness that made people not dare to look at it directly. Ding Meng secretly activated his origin energy, and the sword began to tremble and hum. It was as if the sword was resonating with the energy he was pouring into it. It was as if it had a mind of its own and was instantly activated. Ding Meng was surprised and happy. He had finally obtained a sword that had not been melted by the heat he had poured into it. "This is a good sword," he exclaimed. "It is indeed a good sword," Chu Shaoqing explained. Chu Shaoqing explained, "This sword was originally a very ordinary alloy sword, but with a trace of krypton and platinum metals added, it was formed after a precise synthesis process." Although her explanation was short, Ding Meng's eyes widened. Krypton itself was not a metal, but a kind of gas. It had to go through super high pressure before it could form a soft solid. Then, it had to be fused with other alloys in proportion to form krypton. Krypton was a kind of super alloy. Its hardness, melting point, boiling point, and toughness far exceeded that of advanced alloys. The value of this kind of metal was ridiculously high, and it was calculated in grams. It was usually used in the core components of interstellar battleships, such as the propulsion furnace. When the silver core stone released energy, it would generate a temperature of millions of degrees in the reactor. At that time, krypton's role would be reflected. However, this was also the problem. Such a precious and expensive metal, even if it was only a microgram, had been fused into an ordinary ancient sword. Who the hell had nothing better to do after eating so much of it? Such a waste of God's gift was simply unforgivable. Chapter 116. What do you mean by refined synthesis? Ding Meng's surprise was reasonable. Although platinum was rare, it might not be able to contain origin energy. "I'm not sure about the specific principles. You'll have to ask Randy or Ruolin," Chu Xiaoxiao replied with a bitter smile. Chu Shaoqing replied with a bitter smile, "My third brother got this sword by chance from someone else. He loved classical swordsmanship, but he didn't know how to use it. After he passed away, no one else could use it, so I kept it." Ding Meng finally understood Chu Shaoqing's intentions. How should he describe this sword? You could say that it was a godly weapon. In terms of material, it was indeed a godly weapon, because the cost of making it was probably no less than that of a battle armor. However, if you were to say that it was trash, then it could be said that it was truly trash. It was originally a high-tech material, but it was forcefully added into an antique weapon. It was completely useless. This was probably Chu Shaoqing's third brother's special hobby. However, for a family like the Chu family, someone like Chu Shaoqing's third brother was a typical prodigal son. However, Chu Shaoqing still kept this prodigal son's item, which proved that the relationship between her and her brother was very deep. Now that she had given this sword to Ding Meng, it was obvious that she wanted to befriend Ding Meng. Chu Shaoqing was a proud daughter of the heavens, and her vision was undoubtedly unique. She could see that Ding Meng had potential. Ding Meng was very talented, but he was limited by his identity. If someone like Ding Meng was placed in a big family or sect, he would definitely be treated as a talent and heavily nurtured. Ding Meng put the sword back into the box and said solemnly, "Miss Chu, don't worry. I will make good use of this sword. Then I'll look forward to it." Chu Shaoqing smiled slightly. "Ding Meng, our journey is very long. It will take about 10 days of flying. The ship is equipped with a dedicated lounge. If you feel bored after staying in the induction cabin for too long, there's also an entertainment area and a restaurant. I won't take up any more of your time. See you later." Ding Meng could only express his gratitude once more. At the same time, he could not help but sigh. A probe ship was equipped with an entertainment area, fully considering the boring details of interstellar flight. Sure enough, one could do whatever one wanted with money. There wasn't anything special about the private lounge. It was just a small room for each person with a private space. The room was equipped with an induction cabin, a nutrition cabin, and a medical cabin. Judging from the models, they were all Anvil products. What Ding Meng needed to do at this time was to seize the time to cultivate his cultivation technique. Although he could construct the origin through meditation alone, it would be a waste not to use the sensor cabin. With this thing's precise positioning, the efficiency would be much higher. Ding Meng had long memorized the structure of the sixth origin of the Diamond Star technique and had completed more than half of it. However, he was interrupted by the arrival of Xiao Qiu and the sneak attack of the surprise attack mercenary group. Now that there was no external interference and no shortage of resources, Ding Meng made rapid progress in the construction. The six origins quickly formed an octahedron, completely enveloping the heart. Unlike before, after the origin was activated this time, the octahedron could be stretched and shrunk at will, changing into many different shapes. Based on past experience, Ding Meng first condensed a single mirror surface, then condensed two mirrors at the same time, and then condensed a triangular prism. Now, condensing a triangular prism was no longer difficult. During the battle with Salazar, Ding Meng's golden top had this ability. It could block most attacks. As the sixth origin was successfully constructed, Ding Meng had a vague feeling that the Diamond Star technique was mainly focused on defense and self-defense. However, he still had to ask Little Rascal how to use the octahedron. Since they were already in space, Ding Meng decided to wake Little Rascal up. In fact, he did not need to summon Little Rascal, because Little Rascal's voice was already heard. Gene body energy is detected to be abundant. Level 2 memory access unlocked. Authorization complete. In Ding Meng's field of vision, the small white disc that represented Little Rascal changed again. It was compressed and stretched, and finally became a caterpillar, wriggling in the lower left corner of his field of vision. Ah, Ding Meng laughed. Little Rascal, you become a worm now. What do you mean by a worm? Little Rascal was not satisfied. My body has become more complete, and I've become more beautiful. Ding Meng's eyelids drooped. Yes, you become more beautiful. Little Rascal was not happy. Yo, what's with that sour expression? Aren't you happy that you've unlocked level 2 memory access? Of course I'm happy. Ding Meng immediately perked up. By the way, Little Rascal, I've constructed the sixth origin. Little Rascal laughed. Haha, congratulations, Ding Meng. You've completed the first stage of Diamond Star technique. Next, you'll have to strengthen all the origin. Ding Meng said hesitantly. In that case, my foundational cultivation method is completed just like that. Little Rascal sneered. TSK, I told you, you've only completed the first stage. Is there a second stage? Ding Meng suddenly felt his heart race. Of course. What else do you think level 2 memory access is for? Little Rascal replied proudly. The seventh origin is waiting for you. Don't be scared by its difficulty. Ding Meng took a deep breath. He had to forcefully suppress the ecstasy in his heart. He didn't expect the Diamond Star technique to be a 7-star cultivation method. Can I see the seventh origin structure first? Ding Meng asked. That won't do. Little Rascal wriggled on the screen. Why not? Ding Meng was stunned. Little Rascal snorted. Who told you to describe me as a worm? Ding Meng was speechless. He immediately corrected himself. Okay, you're not a worm. Little Rascal was also speechless. Ding Meng, can't you show some sincerity? Ding Meng thought for a moment and continued. Okay, Little Rascal, you're not a worm. Little Rascal sighed helplessly. Ding Meng, if you have a girlfriend in the future, I suspect she'll beat you to death sooner or later. What kind of logic is that? Ding Meng was confused. What does a girlfriend have to do with the origin? Little Rascal said in disappointment. Look at yourself. You don't even know how to make a girl happy. Ding Meng was even more confused. Why should I make a girl happy? Little Rascal said. Then do you still want to see the seventh origin structure? Yes, Ding Meng replied without any hesitation. But you're not a girl, Little Rascal. Little Rascal couldn't help but ask. Then what if you have a girlfriend, and she knows the origin structure? Ding Meng replied without even thinking. The premise is that I have to have a girlfriend first. We'll talk about it when I have one. You. Little Rascal was once again defeated by his caveman mindset. Forget it. If I don't give you the cold shoulder for a few days, you'll never be able to improve your EQ. Huh? Aren't we in a spaceship? This spaceship is pretty advanced. Ding Meng was surprised. How did you know? Little Rascal said, my authority has increased, and so have my abilities. Let's see if you still dare to look down on me. Ding Meng's interest was piqued. Little Rascal, what new abilities do you have now? A lot. With your EQ, it's very difficult for me to explain them to you. Little Rascal snorted. It's just that this room is too small. Ding Meng, you can go out and walk around, and I'll be able to read the spaceship's original data. Really? Ding Meng looked at her doubtfully. Of course it's real. Little Rascal replied confidently. My learning ability has increased by several times. Ding Meng nodded. Going out for a walk was a good idea. After all, he had successfully constructed the sixth origin, and it was something worth celebrating. More importantly, he knew that there was a seventh origin waiting for him, so it was even more worth celebrating. All right, didn't Miss Chu say that there's a restaurant on the spaceship? Let's go to the restaurant then. I haven't eaten anything in days, and my mouth is so bland that I'm about to vomit. The restaurant wasn't big, but it was exquisitely decorated. The decor was also quite beautiful, making it hard to tell that it was a restaurant on a spaceship. It was completely like Autumn Pool City's lakeside garden. Miss Chu really knew how to enjoy life. At this time, the restaurant was empty. Ding Meng chose a long table for two in the corner. It was near the window, and the window must have been embedded with crystal glass to reflect a pleasing scenery of the lake and mountains. As soon as Ding Meng sat down, a screen automatically rose from the center of the table, displaying a mirror menu. The menu was very detailed. Rice, barbecue, Western food, cuisine, seafood, desserts, noodle soup, Jin Feng specialties, Sui Feng specialties. There was a dazzling array of dishes, and Ding Meng was almost drooling when he saw these mirror dishes. His finger quickly tapped on the screen. Turkish barbecue? Let's start with 5 plates. What's this called? Black pepper and lemon roast chicken? Okay, let's have 10. Oh no, let's have 20. What's this? Mottled stone fish from Sui Feng Oasis? 10 is no problem. How about eel fried shrimp noodles? Based on bowls? Then let's have 15 bowls. What? Braised chicken wings? That's my favorite. Give me 30 pairs. He tapped on a long, densely packed list of dishes on the screen. Little Rascal rolled his eyes. It seems that free food is the best. You're going to stuff yourself to death by ordering so much. With Ding Meng's current body, eating so much wasn't actually enough. For Origin ability users, food was nothing more than enjoying the taste and the process of eating. What really supported the body was the nutrient solution, the amplification agent, and the origin energy itself. However, at this time, a familiar voice came from behind him. Hee, your dishes aren't that good. This is called stuffing yourself. Why didn't you order steak? Ding Meng was immersed in the pleasure of ordering food and didn't pay attention to his surroundings. Now that he turned around and saw who it was, he couldn't help but smile. Chapter 117. The newcomer was a soldier because he was also wearing a uniform. The Norse Empire's military uniform had a strong John Deacon style to it. The combat uniform was a very retro suit with a tight collar, a short jacket, and a pair of tall combat boots. The entire uniform was khaki in color. If this military uniform was worn by Ding Meng, it would definitely look out of place, because Ding Meng's figure would not be able to achieve such an effect. However, the soldier in front of him was completely different. He was tall, handsome, and had a smile on his face. This smile looked a little cynical, but it also felt very friendly. After all, there were only a few people who could make Ding Meng smile happily, and Xinjie was one of them. The restaurant's lighting was also khaki, and the two of them looked at each other under the soft light. Ding Meng noticed the golden cross inlaid on Xinjie's uniform, and he could not help but speak first. I didn't expect you to have already become a flight sergeant. Xinjie smiled and said, but I'd rather go to the Christine Academy and be a free student. Ding Meng also smiled. He did not ask how Xinjie knew his identity, nor did he ask about Xinjie's experiences during this period of time. For people like them, as long as they could see each other alive and well, That was enough. Of course, there were still some changes. In the few months that they had not seen each other, Xinjie had become even more handsome. Even Ding Ming, who usually did not pay much attention to his appearance, had to admit that Xinjie was really handsome now. When he stood in the middle of the light, all the exquisite furnishings in the restaurant became a foil to him. "Your shoes are nice," Ding Ming suddenly said. Xinjie was not wearing combat boots, but a pair of shiny black leather shoes. Even though he had joined the military, this man still seemed to adhere to his principles. You can break your head, but your hair must not be messed up. You can bleed, but your shoes must be polished. Therefore, he gave Ding Ming a thumbs up. "Your taste is still so unique. I polish my shoes every day, zebra brand shoe polish." After saying that, the two of them burst into laughter. Ding Ming had not been so happy for a long time. Although he had not known Xinjie for more than a day, as long as he saw Xinjie, especially the complacent, confident, cunning, and weird smile of Xinjie, Ding Ming felt a sense of familiarity. The two of them sat facing each other. Xinjie fiddled with the menu. "Do you want steak?" "My treat." Ding Ming thought back to when they first met over a steak. Now that Xinjie mentioned the two words steak, Ding Ming felt exceptionally close to him, but he still had some doubts. "Don't tell me. You're also participating in this mission? You're such a killjoy. It's such a waste not to eat the good food, but to talk about business." Xinjie sighed and then turned on his wristwatch. The face of a middle-aged man appeared on the screen. Ding Ming had seen this man before. During the space chase with Baines, the one who saved the two of them in the end was this officer, the commander of the patrol fleet. Xinjie said, "Major Thunderous Battle. The commander of the patrol fleet numbered NX-3DDT-51. He's also my commanding officer now. We were rescued because of him, but this time I took the initiative to ask him to pilot this Songqing exploration ship." Ding Ming nodded. "It seems that the fleet that sent us here was also numbered this way." Xinjie switched the screen, and an interstellar map rose from the dining table. The map was not big, and it showed the star field around a TCP-121 nebula. "Do you have any impression of it?" Xinjie asked. Ding Ming could only shake his head. His memory was good, but such images were everywhere in space. How could he have any impression of it? Xinjie sighed. "It seems that you really don't know anything." Xinjie switched the map again and continued to ask, "Then you will definitely have an impression of this place." The map changed again. This time, it showed a large brown star. Around it, there were 5 suns of different colors orbiting it. The 5 colors were azure blue, fiery red, brownish yellow, lavender, and milky white. Not only did Ding Ming have an impression of this place, but it was also very memorable. The planet where the black gold base was located was in this strange and terrifying star system. The screen changed again. The star system shrank, and the entire map was enlarged. Starting from the TCP-121 nebula, a straight line crossed space, and its destination was the star system where the black gold base was located. There was a green cursor flashing on the straight line, and the data showed that it was very close to its destination. Xinjie pointed at the green dot and said, "These are the coordinates of our spaceship right now. This is the destination of this mission?" Ding Ming could not help but ask. "Yes." Xinjie answered affirmatively. "As the pilot of the spaceship, I am definitely the first to know the destination of the mission." Ding Ming took a deep breath. "But why are you so sure that I have been to this place before?" Xinjie sighed. "Do you still remember the swordfish transport ship of Xingda Corporation?" I recalled the route later. "The flight path that the Falcon spaceship used to chase us is exactly the same as the route that we are taking now. It's just that the direction is different. We are now flying in the opposite direction, and this trajectory has not changed at all. The coordinates, route, angle, and space, the error is not more than 0.005%. Don't tell me you don't know what this error rate means." Ding Ming, of course, knew. This error rate meant that the swordfish spaceship had taken off from a planet in this star system, and the probability of it was more than 995%. Suddenly, Ding Ming fell silent. He did not know whether to cry or laugh, whether to regret or to rejoice. In any case, he could not describe his feelings at this moment. Sometimes, fate loved to joke around. Back then, he had risked his life and tried his best to escape from Black Gold Base. How many lives have been lost in the process? Although most people did not die, because of him, Little Four had always made him unable to let go. That bracelet was still on him, and he had never thrown it away even when he was so poor. Now, in order to avoid the pursuit of the surprise mercenary group, he had no choice but to leave planet TT-12. God knew that this mission would send him back to Black Gold Base, and the bracelet would be sent back to its original place. Did this mean that his hope would be destroyed again? For those who tried their best to survive, fate was sometimes really like an endless net. The more you struggled, the tighter it would be, until you could no longer struggle. As for the bold words like, "Man can conquer nature," or "My life is in my own hands," they were all shouted by those ignorant and fearless brats. If you put him in Black Gold Base for a year and a half, would he still dare to shout like that? Xings stared at his uncertain expression and said word by word, "What did you steal from them?" Ding Meng came back to his senses and sighed. "Actually, I didn't steal anything. I can see that." Xing nodded. "You don't have the potential to be a thief." Ding Meng asked curiously, "Why do you say that?" Xing said meaningfully, "How can you be hunted down for such a long distance after stealing something? A real thief always comes and goes without a trace, leaving no trace at all for the enemy." Ding Meng laughed involuntarily. "If I'm lucky enough this time, I'll definitely ask you to teach me how to steal things in the future." Xing said lightly, "Your luck has always been good. Think about how you were saved in that situation last time. One is bound to have good fortune after surviving a disaster." If it weren't for Xing's incredible evasion last time, Ding Meng would have died 5 times over. However, he still sighed and said, "It's just a pity that this thing can't be shaken off once it's tainted. That's the problem." Xing remained silent. In fact, he also had a faint bad feeling. Back then, the enemy had chased after them for thousands of miles in an airship. Even though they were right under the nose of the Imperial fleet, they still tried to kill them. Just based on this, Ding Meng would be in a lot of trouble. If the trouble last time came from the Federation, then this time it came from the Empire. Some things didn't make sense just by thinking about it. Even a colonel from the military was paying attention to this mission, and the people executing it were a bunch of inexperienced students. This meant that the thing on Ding Meng's body had too many implications. Perhaps it was a whirlpool of death, and those who got sucked into it wouldn't have a good ending. Xing suddenly said coldly, "Don't worry. I can't afford to offend someone like you. I won't accompany you to your death." His tone was cold, and his expression was not good. However, Ding Meng felt a long-lost warmth at this moment. He did not know Xing very well, but he understood Xing's behavior. Back then, he had unintentionally released the half-dead Xing from the hibernation pod and gave him a plate of steak, pulling Xing back from the clutches of the Grim Reaper. However, Xing had also saved his life from a hail of bullets more than once. Now that he saw his name on the mission list, Xing volunteered to be the flight pilot for this mission. Some people's hearts could not be seen from their appearance. Their hearts were often expressed through concrete actions. At least, Xing's appearance on this ship was enough to explain many things. At the very least, he was paying attention to Ding Meng. Ding Meng could not help but sigh. "I owe you again." "You don't owe me." Xing waved his hand and said, "I just find it strange. Why are you students so bold?" Ding Meng frowned and said, "We are bold." Xing glanced at him, his eyes full of ridicule. "You know almost nothing about the time, place, reason, specific details, and other elements of this mission, but you dare to accept it rashly. That Chu Shaoqing is not simple. Do you have a crush on her? Is that why you followed me?" Ding Meng laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "Do I have the right to have a crush on her?" Xing also laughed. "So, it seems that you have received a bribe from her? You can understand it that way." Ding Meng thought of the ancient sword. "She's my classmate at Christine's school, and she's also my sparring customer at the martial arts school. Is our relationship clear enough? Xinjia turned off the wristwatch and stood up. Haha, it's almost time. Come with me to the command cabin. Your classmate may have arrived before you. Chapter 118. The command module of Songqing's spaceship was located at the top of the center of the spaceship. It was a circular hall. The facilities here were very simple. Other than the central control console and manual pilot seat, there were only sofas, coffee tables, and other living facilities. The walls were naturally made of metal, but there was a layer of crystal glass that circled around the walls. On it was a display of the brilliant night view of Autumn Pool City. If Xinjia had not said that this was the command module, Dingming would have thought that this was the entertainment area of the spaceship. At this moment, a beautiful 3D dynamic map of the galaxy was displayed on the control console. Everyone was surrounding the control console to observe it carefully. However, Xing Yi, Ruolan, and Xiaoqiu's eyes were mostly on Xinjia. For young girls like them, Xinjia's handsomeness and appearance would usually attract the attention of the opposite sex. This was similar to how men like to look at beautiful women. Chu Xiaoqing was still quite reserved. She basically listened to Ji Ming's explanation, but when it was Xinjia's turn to speak, her eyes would occasionally look at his face. Everyone, we're about to arrive at the K8 galaxy. The K galaxy is made up of 24 galaxies, and most of them are under the surveillance of the Holy Grail Federation space station. However, the K8 galaxy structure is unique, its environment is unique, and it's located on the outskirts, so it's not under the Federation's jurisdiction. Ji Ming explained as he fiddled with the map. 5 different colored Lai Yang stars appeared at the same time, emitting a brilliant glow on the control console. This was the first time Ding Meng had heard that this strange galaxy was called the K8 galaxy. It all started with the letter K, which seemed to match the K virus. Wow, what a beautiful galaxy! Star Art suddenly cried out in surprise. This Lai Yang star actually has 5 different colors. How magical! Ruolan was also fascinated. Randy could not help but say, if this place is turned into a vacation planet, the Federation might make a fortune. Who knows how many tourists will come here every year? It would have been better if he did not say anything. Once he said it, everyone felt that it made sense. The beautiful colors, the brilliant sunlight, and the spectacular scenery would deeply fascinate anyone who saw it for the first time. If this place was not turned into a tourist destination, what else could it be used for? Ding Meng was the only one who remained silent. He was the only one who knew that although this place looked dreamy and beautiful, it was a real hell on earth below. The painful and tragic lives of the laborers, the endless fighting and killing, the accompanying diseases, plagues, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and all kinds of monsters buried deep underground made this hell look as beautiful as heaven. However, the real heaven was probably hell, because people could only truly be free and completely rest in peace after death. Now, Dingming only hoped that the location of the mission would not be on the planet where Black Gold Base was located. Ji Ming continued to zoom in on the map and pointed at a planet. Everyone, the lost spaceship of our empire is on this planet called Dead Silence. The Dead Silence planet is the final destination of our mission. In such a beautiful galaxy, a planet with such an ominous name did not match at all. Of course, the name was given by the pioneers who first arrived decades, or even centuries ago, and the latecomers had no right to change it. However, the name made everyone feel uncomfortable, so they could only open their eyes wide and observe carefully. This time, it was Clory who spoke first. It's a bit far at the very edge of the galaxy. It has to be far. Longming nodded in agreement. The light of the 5 Lai Yang stars shining down together will probably reach a temperature of thousands of degrees. If we don't stay away from them, I think we'll be scorched. Xinjia clapped his hands and said, Everyone, that's why you must carefully check the azure light armor provided by Anvil before you set off. It can withstand both heat and cold. It's the basic guarantee of your safety after you land. Xinjia's reminder did not enter Xingyi's ears at all. Her big, beautiful eyes looked at the other with anticipation. Sergeant Xinjia, Will you come with us? XINGS smiled and said, I'll send everyone to the surface, but I won't be participating in the actual operation. Everyone must keep your communication system open and contact me at all times. If there's any situation, immediately report back to the exploration ship. Do not act alone. Oh. Xing Yi replied disappointedly. Everyone chatted back and forth, and none of them noticed that Ding Ming's expression was extremely serious. At this moment, his heart was constantly sinking. What he was most afraid of had come true. So this planet was not called Dome Planet, but Dead Silence Planet. It really lived up to its name. He did not know what was wrong with the pioneers who first discovered this planet to be able to come up with such a good name. They could not be called pioneers, they could be called prophets. He suddenly remembered that the solar eclipse of the K8 system's alignment of 5 stars happened once every 20 years. He secretly asked, Little Rascal, do the math. Was the pioneer who first came to this planet 20 years ago? Little Rascal immediately replied, No, it's far longer than that. The interior of the warship buried under Black Gold Base is made of cheap alloy, and the control panel doesn't even have a virtual screen. Instead, it has a physical screen with physical buttons. Based on the technological level of the facilities, and assuming that the warship was the first to discover this planet, it's been at least 300 years since they discovered this planet. That warship was the warship where the K-virus resided. But no matter how amazing a warship was, if it was buried for 300 years without moving, it would have basically rotted away. This was indeed the case. Back then, these laborers had been digging in the main mining area for so many years, but only a few of them had discovered that this was the wreckage of a warship. As for the human remains, they had probably turned to dust long ago. Therefore, forget about the skeletons of Imperial soldiers. Just the solar eclipse a few months ago was enough for the monsters from the depths of the earth to emerge and devour everything that could be eaten. Not even a scrap was left. The Falcon spacecraft that Bamboo Pole and the others lost back then had arrived here 15 years ago. However, it was not like Ding Ming had not been to that spacecraft before. It was indeed an Imperial spacecraft because it had the Imperial insignia on it, but Ding Ming was sure that there were no skeletons on it. What exactly was the Imperial military looking for on this planet? Little Rascal said, Is there such a possibility? There are other abandoned ships in other parts of the Dead Silent Planet. We might be going to other warships to salvage the wreckage. Other warships? That's a possibility. Ding Ming suddenly sneered. But what kind of wreckage are we going to salvage? That's definitely not possible. Little Rascal asked why. Ding Ming said, According to the common laws of the Empire and the Federation, everyone has the obligation to properly dispose of the corpses of soldiers. If they really are looking for skeletons, the Empire doesn't even need to send people over. They can just send a diplomatic request to the Federation. Even if the Federation refuses, the Empire can still openly send a search and rescue fleet over. In any case, no matter what the Empire does, they shouldn't be sending rookies like us to sneak over like this. Besides, the cost of this trip isn't small either. Just look at the equipment and resources provided by Anvil. It doesn't make sense at all. Little Rascal also seemed to be silent. Her calculation ability was indeed very strong, but non-data calculation and reasoning were not her forte. In the end, Ding Ming had spent most of his time surviving in dangerous environments, so he was exceptionally sensitive to all kinds of traps. What they're looking for, other than the K-virus, might also be the Holy Temple map. Little Rascal finally said something shocking. Holy Temple map? Ding Ming was curious. What's that? Little Rascal said. My database has been updated with more information. It shows that the creator of the K-virus is Dr. Hazink Sinjabina E. Martinez. Dr. Hazink has 2 major inventions. One of them is the K-virus, which can modify biological genes. The other is the Holy Temple map. As for what kind of map it is, the database doesn't say, but it suggests that it has a lot to do with the K-virus. Ding Ming also fell silent. Little Rascal's information was not a lot, but it was still too much for him to digest. He definitely did not know this Dr. Hazink, and even if he did, he was probably someone from several hundred years ago. It was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Could it be that the K-virus was first discovered somewhere, and the Holy Temple map could lead him to that place? There was no basis for this conjecture. At most, it could only be considered a wild guess. However, one thing was for sure, and that was the K-virus had a huge background. The implications related to it were not small. This Holy Temple map that had suddenly popped up definitely involved some kind of secret, and its value must be extraordinary. That was why the military paid so much attention and was so cautious. While deep in thought, Ding Ming noticed that on the main control panel, the green dot representing the Songqing spaceship had already broken through the atmosphere and was slowly descending towards the ground. Little Rascal suddenly exclaimed, "That's not right. Ding Ming, look." Ding Ming already saw that the Black Gold number 3 transport ship that had been hovering above the planet had disappeared. The dome above the Black Gold base had also disappeared. Did the ambush mercenaries retreat? Little Rascal asked hesitantly. I do hope that they will really retreat. Ding Ming's expression became even more serious. He had a feeling that the ambush mercenaries had not really retreated. They had chased them all the way to planet TT-12. So how could they have given up? Little Rascal said. But at least this place is safe for now. Ding Ming agreed with this assessment. The commanders of the ambush mercenaries would never have expected that Ding Ming, who had desperately escaped, would actually miraculously return to the Black Gold base. This was a classic example of the more dangerous a place is, the safer it is. At this time, Chengda was already calling out to everyone. Everyone, please head to the connecting module. We're about to land. Just as they were about to move, a large hand pressed down on Ding Ming's shoulder. Xi Jie still had that unique smile on his face as he said, "Be careful. If we're done for this time, there'll be a lot of fun." Ding Ming nodded. "Don't worry, I'll definitely come back for steak." Chapter 119. It was still yellow sand that stretched as far as the eye could see. The scorching heat waves drifted across the desert, even distorting the air. The wristwatch displayed current temperature, 802 degrees, humidity lower than 5%. In such a scorching environment, Randy could only raise the visor of his jade light armor. Unlike the others, he had a powerful origin energy foundation that could directly resist the sun and heat. At this moment, Songqing's spaceship had already entered a transparent camouflage mode. It had completely merged with the desert, and the real body could not be seen at all. The people who came down from the spaceship were Chengda, Chu Shaoqing, Ding Ming, Little Chiu, Randy, Xing Yi, Long Ming, and Klaus. The 8 of them were fully armed and slowly moved forward in the desert. At the same time, 8 screens rose from the control panel of the spaceship's command module, displaying real-time images of the data sent back by the ion-scanning eyes on everyone's helmets. Ruolan was responsible for organizing and analyzing the data. In Ruolan's field of vision, although Ding Ming and the others were standing in the middle of the desert, they were actually standing in a very small crater surrounded by sand dunes. Xi Jie was pinpointing on the map. The coordinates show that it's right below your feet. Roger that. Chengda paused the communication and turned to the others. Everyone, let's get to work here. Actually, there was no need for them to work. They opened their backpacks and took out their toolboxes, and the intelligent drilling robot was assembled in just a few minutes. This kind of drilling robot didn't actually have the appearance of a robot. It was an alloy probe with a diameter of 10 meters, and its tail and wings were equipped with ultra-high-pressure coagulators and rapid cooling fans. It was as if countless fans were pushing against a bullet head as it drilled deep into the ground. Along the way, it could decompose the earth and rocks that it drilled. At the same time, it could also spray metal mixtures on the walls, quickly solidifying an artificial passage. What tens of thousands of laborers in Black Gold Base had taken several months to complete, this robot only needed 10 minutes to complete. Of course, the value of this robot was incomparable to that of laborers. Looking at the pitch-black hole in the ground, Ding Ming's expression was as if he was in a daze. Little Rascal couldn't help but ask, "Have you been here before?" Ding Ming nodded slightly. This place used to be called a sinkhole. Although it has changed a lot, I can still tell that this is definitely a sinkhole. The sinkhole was the huge pit 50 kilometers away from the black gold base. It was also the entrance to the main mine's elevator. Ding Ming transmitted his thoughts to Little Rascal, and Little Rascal immediately understood. Without the dome, the high temperature can directly evaporate the water, and the sun can quickly destroy the original terrain to form a desert. So the sinkhole is now a sand pit, right? But that's not the most important point. Ding Ming's gaze landed on Chengda in the distance. The important thing is, why did Songqing's spaceship stop nearby the moment it arrived? Why didn't Chengda go anywhere else? Instead, he ran straight here after getting off the spaceship. How did he find the location so accurately? Little Rascal didn't say anything. She completely understood Ding Ming's thoughts. The Empire's military was most likely here for the K-virus. The robots were still digging. Waves of tremors came from underground. The black hole in the ground was like a terrifying maw. After staring at it for a long time, Little Rascal felt that familiar feeling again. It was just like when he first discovered the metal door in the experiment hall. It was as if he saw some kind of ominous disaster floating out from behind the door. At this moment, Ding Ming felt that the black hole in the ground was just like that door. The solar eclipse a few months ago had buried that terrifying hell underground, but now they had opened the door to hell again. Why do humans always like to do stupid things? This strange thought suddenly popped into Ding Ming's mind. In his mind, the tunnel rumbled, and not long after, the drilling robot rose back to the ground. The blades at the back of the robot were all closed, forming a smooth and flat chassis. It was obvious that people could stand on it. It was going to send everyone down. Sure enough, Ji Ming's voice rang out in everyone's ears through the communicators. Everyone, it's up to you now. Good luck. The main mining area hadn't changed much. It was still the familiar scene of the damp tunnel and muddy ground. The only difference was that there was no one in the mining area anymore, because those workers had probably been eaten clean by the monsters. Randy took out 2 fist-sized metal objects from his backpack. Shingy couldn't help but ask, "What are these?" Randy smiled. "These are robot dogs." "Dogs?" He was curious. Randy tossed the metal objects into the air. The metal objects immediately buzzed and emitted red lasers in all directions. They could clearly see that the lasers illuminated every corner within a 10-meter radius of the tunnel. Finally, the metal objects flew rapidly into the depths of the tunnel. Rulin's voice rang out in the communicator. "These are curved light detection dogs. Everyone, please wait patiently for a moment. We'll be able to figure out the terrain very soon." As more and more detection dogs were released, a large amount of data was fed back. A three-dimensional model was gradually forming on the control panel of the spaceship. This was the topographic map of the underground warship. Rulin also sent it to everyone's wristwatches. "It really is a warship," Shingy exclaimed as she looked at the map. Long Ming frowned. "This warship isn't small. It should be a starship, but I feel that its shape is a bit awkward." Claus agreed. "There's no such warship in active service. It should be a Kuan Peng warship." Randy was indeed a statistician. He could even identify the model. "It's a very old warship. It's no longer in service many years ago. The Norse Empire has the most of these warships." Chengda clapped his hands. "Yes, this is our Empire's warship. It crashed here many years ago. Back then, our Empire and the Federation were at war, so we couldn't come here. Now it's a peaceful time. Everyone do your best." Everyone nodded in unison. This explained the ins and outs of this operation very well. Many years ago, the war between the Empire and the Federation was unprecedentedly tragic. Back then, both sides didn't have a large territory. This K-8 series was probably at the periphery of the war zone. It was normal that few people knew that the warship was lost here. Ding Ming sighed inwardly. Only now did he feel that Machine Gun's death at his hands was an injustice. It took Machine Gun a few years to figure out the internal structure of the warship. Of course, it wasn't Machine Gun's fault. They didn't have detection dogs. The main reason was that the warship had been buried underground for a long time. Many of the tunnels couldn't be dug casually. Otherwise, it would easily collapse. Therefore, on Machine Gun's map, there were red dots that represented death. Almost no one dug deep. Randy's explanation reminded Ding Ming that if the warship was in the shape of a Kuan Peng, then the red dots corresponded to the upper part. It was actually the lower right part of the main warship. At least half of it hadn't been excavated yet. The map definitely couldn't show the whole picture, but Ding Ming could already see that they had dug a hole in the Kuan Peng's back that went straight to the internal organs. Therefore, the original map looked like a gourd. Area PC-35 was located at the heart, and the experiment hall was obviously the core. The red dots were almost all around the edges of the internal organs. Therefore, the wings, head, and tail weren't discovered. Ding Ming thought to himself, the bridge, storage, connecting cabin, and armory shouldn't have been discovered. Little Rascal said, in theory, yes, but we can't rule out the fact that many parts have rotted over the years. Ding Ming said, is there a possibility that what they're looking for is in the bridge or the storage? Little Rascal seemed to know what he was worried about. It explained, even if it's the energy storage, it's useless because the energy used to modify Ding Ming was a very special synthetic energy. Only Dr. Harson knows how to make it. Even if there are other energy sources on the ship, they won't be able to find any clues about the K-virus. Ding Ming sighed. Sometimes, clues don't have to be found by searching. Speculation and analysis can also be found. At this moment, the map of the known terrain was completed. Chengda suddenly said, everyone, in order to increase efficiency and complete the mission as soon as possible, I suggest that we split up. No one objected to this suggestion because everyone had already seen that the interior of the warship was too big. It would be very difficult to complete the mission in a short period of time if they didn't split up. How we split up? Long Ming asked. Chengda pointed at the map and said, you and Randy will be fine, right? This allocation actually had a deeper meaning. Long Ming was the strongest and Randy was the weakest. If they encountered any danger, at least they would be safe. However, Randy immediately jumped up. Why? Why do I have to be in the same group as a man? I won't do it. He definitely wanted to be in the same group as Chu Shaoqing, but Star Art started to blink and mock him. Do you want to be in the same group as Sister Chu? Before Randy could answer, Chengda said to Chu Shaoqing, Miss Chu, it's better to be in the same group as Ding Ming. In this group of people, Ding Ming's score was the highest. Letting Ding Ming follow Chu Shaoqing was undoubtedly the military's greatest protection for Chu Shaoqing. After all, she was the strongest. Randy undoubtedly understood Chengda's arrangement. You can't let Miss Chu protect you, right? However, he was still unconvinced. Humph, it's your loss not to be in the same group as me. Let's wait and see. Chengda continued. Lan Xiu will be in the same group as me. Xiao Qiu did not object at all. Okay, the grouping obviously followed the principle of men and women working together would not be too tiring. Of course, it was mainly for safety reasons. He could not be in the same group as Claus and let the other two girls work together. After all, Star Art was relatively weaker, and it was more suitable for Claus to take care of them. After the grouping, the routes and areas were naturally arranged. The four teams spread out in 4 different directions. Before leaving, Ding Ming looked at the map again. Chengda's arrangement was exactly as he had predicted. Everyone's location was indeed a red dot area. Chapter 120. The mining area was still damp. Ding Ming stood in the dark tunnel and did not move. He simply sat down on a rock. Chu Shaoqing was puzzled. What's wrong? Ding Ming fiddled with his helmet. There's a communication problem. There was indeed a problem, because at this moment, on the main control panel of the spaceship, the screen representing Ding Ming's first-person perspective was filled with signal interference particles. Xing's voice soon rang out in the communicator. What's wrong with your ion scanning eye? It seems to be malfunctioning. Ding Ming continued fiddling with it. There's a tool in the backpack. Do you know how to fix it? Xing hesitated for a moment before asking. If you don't know how to fix it, you can come up first and let Rulin take a look. That won't be necessary. Ding Ming got up and walked towards Chu Shaoqing. The power supply of this helmet seems to be blocked. Miss Chu's helmet seems to have the same problem. Hearing this, Chu Xiaoqing was stunned. Before she could react, Ding Ming suddenly reached out and pressed down on her helmet. With a little force from his ring finger, the screen representing Chu Xiaoqing on the control panel was immediately filled with pockmarks. Xinjie did not seem surprised by this. He still reminded how run in the communicator. There's a malfunction repair device in the toolbox. Just take it out and install it in the slot on the left side of the helmet. Okay, got it. After that, Ding Ming turned off the communicator. At the same time, he made a cut gesture to Chu Xiaoqing. Chu Xiaoqing was still in shock. She had no idea what Ding Ming was up to. What are you doing? Ding Ming nodded at her. His hand was still on her ear as he gently cut down. Chu Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment before she followed his gesture and turned off the communicator. She trusted Ding Ming. Ding Ming must have his reasons for doing this. Ding Ming sat down on the rock again. We're not going anywhere. We're just going to stay here. Chu Xiaoqing could not help but ask why. Ding Ming raised his head and looked at her. His eyes became sharp. Miss Chu, do you really think you can find the remains of the Empire soldiers? Chu Xiaoqing took a deep breath. You mean we can't find it? Ding Ming did not answer her directly. Instead, he asked, Miss Chu, did you receive this mission 3 months ago? Chu Xiaoqing hesitated and said, Yes. The inspector on the space station of planet TT-12 came to my house as a guest and accidentally mentioned this mission to my father. That's why I had this idea. After all, you know that I've always wanted to go to the front line. Ding Ming nodded. He could now confirm one thing. Bamboo Pole must have received orders from the Imperial military to hide on the dead silent star, waiting for an opportunity to find the K-virus. Once Bamboo Pole lost contact, the military would definitely take action. However, Chu Xiaoqing still could not understand Ding Ming's strange behavior. Turning off the scanner and instant communication, Ding Ming, what are you trying to do? Ding Ming let out a long sigh. Miss Chu, thank you very much for your help during this period of time, so I don't want to hide anything from you. 3 months ago, I escaped from this place. No matter what kind of person Ding Ming was, he did not look like he was lying. Chu Xiaoqing looked at him in surprise. But this is really the wreckage of a battleship. Yes, Ding Ming could not deny this. This is indeed the wreckage of a battleship, but this place is more like hell. It's easy to come here, but difficult to leave. What was this place? What danger was there? Was there some secret here that could not be exposed? Why did Ding Ming describe this place as hell? Chu Xiaoqing did not ask these questions. She was undoubtedly a smart woman. She knew that even if she asked some questions, Ding Ming might not be willing to answer. Since Ding Ming was not willing to answer, then there was a reason for him not to. A cold wind suddenly blew through the tunnel, and the silent atmosphere suddenly became strange. Chu Xiaoqing sat down quietly beside Ding Ming. This place does look like there is nothing here. Ding Ming looked at her gratefully. Chu Xiaoqing's action showed her trust in Ding Ming. Miss Chu, thank you. Chu Xiaoqing smiled and said, I should be the one thanking you. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known that you had been here. It's really hard for a person to survive in a place like this. I really can't imagine what kind of price you have to pay. There was a rare hint of emotion in her voice. This was the first time she had traveled to such a remote planet. Although she had seen similar scenes in the International Space Network, the virtual world was fundamentally different from the real world. After all, her identity was there, and she could not understand how the lower class felt about life. Ding Ming said slowly, I can assure you that there are absolutely no corpses of Imperial soldiers here. I believe you. Chu Xiaoqing nodded. But what can we do now? Ding Ming said, we don't do anything. We'll just wait here. Wait. Chu Xiaoqing obviously did not understand. Ding Ming nodded. It's very simple, because the people they are really looking for are not us. Chu Xiaoqing stared at him. You mean, it's Captain Chengde and the others who are looking for us? Ding Ming said, wanting to find them is one thing. Being able to find them is another. This time, Chu Xiaoqing finally understood. No matter what they were looking for, the people in their team who had the highest chance of finding it were definitely not her or Ding Ming. The dynamic map on the control panel had shrunk. The entire map showed the curve of the warship structure. The flashing green dots corresponded to each person. The two green dots in the center of the calabash had not moved since the beginning. Jiming frowned and said, "What are Ding Meng and Chu Xiaoqing doing? There's a problem with their communication. They've been detecting the malfunction." Xinjia was operating the interface of the detection system. "It's good that they're staying there. If there's any trouble, we can easily deal with it. Of course, it's best if there's no trouble." Jiming did not need to ask why, because a new screen appeared on the control panel. It showed that an ion drive had broken through the dead silent star's atmosphere and was flying toward the ground. Ruolin enlarged the image and saw a blazing shark spaceship shuttling through the colorful sunlight. Its destination seemed to be where they were. Songqing's camouflage system could fool the human eye, but it was difficult to avoid radar detection. Therefore, as long as the distance was close enough, the blazing shark spaceship would discover Songqing's spaceship sooner or later. "It looks like space pirates?" Ruolin turned to look at Xinjia. She looked very nervous. "It shouldn't be space pirates." Xinjia also stared at the screen. He noticed that the signal lights on the two wings of the blazing shark spaceship were flashing green. This was a friendly gesture during interstellar travel. Jiming also noticed it and said in a low voice, "It could be bounty hunters." Space pirates and bounty hunters were two completely different groups of people. Most space pirates made a living by robbing. They often killed people for their belongings and committed all kinds of crimes. Whether it was the Federation or the Empire, they almost never asked for a reason. If they saw a space pirate, they would basically beat them up. However, bounty hunters were different. They usually did things for money. These people had certain principles and bottom lines. Some of the hunter groups that had developed to a large scale were very famous. The fleets of the Federal Empire treated them with respect. At this moment, Ding Meng and Chu Xiaoqing had already returned to the ground. Looking at the slowly descending spaceship, Ding Meng also made a judgment. It must be a bounty hunter from some clan. He dared to be so sure because of his spaceship. This kind of blazing shark spaceship was considered a relatively backward spaceship. Its appearance was like a leaping carp. This was a small spaceship that had many functions such as attack, defense, interception, transportation, speed, reconnaissance, and so on. It was precisely because it had too many functions that it did not have any outstanding advantages. If there were any advantages, it would be that although this spaceship looked very small, it could travel long distances. This was because bounty hunters were mostly active in space that was not under the jurisdiction of the Empire. Usually, they would have to fly long distances for any job they received. However, this blazing shark spaceship in front of them seemed to have several ion drives added to its sides, spine, and tail. It was obviously a modified spaceship. How could a regular spaceship of the Federal Empire be modified? It was not that there was absolutely no such thing. How could it be modified in such a ridiculous way? Its appearance looked like a mutated fish with tattered plates. What valuable things could there be on a dead silent planet that would make space pirates travel such a long distance to do a losing trade? Therefore, it was definitely a bounty hunter. Sure enough, after the spaceship stopped, a group of fully armed people walked down from the connecting cabin. They were all wearing different kinds of armor. Judging from the models, it should be the first generation of the Pioneer series. The appearance of the armor could not be any more broken. Could this spaceship, this group of people, be a threat to Songqing? Chu Xiaoqing could not help but glance at Ding Meng. She could not help but sigh. School is indeed different from outer space. You have no insight if you don't know anything. This was undoubtedly praising Ding Meng for his extensive travels and extraordinary insight. However, Ding Meng ignored her and walked toward this group of people. There were 9 people in this group. The leader was an imposing man. His hair was slightly white, but he was hale and hearty. His body was tall and sturdy. Judging from the way he walked and his steady steps, it was obvious that he was an experienced hunter who had been on missions for a long time. The man had already turned on his wristband. On the screen was his own image and information. Silman, Green Arrow Bounty Corps. Position, Captain. At the bottom of the information bar was the Corps logo, the leader's personal signature, and a 4D anti-counterfeiting virtual seal. This meant that they were not imposters. After all, the Green Arrow Corps was very famous in outer space. Ding Ming was also slightly surprised, but he still greeted politely. "Hello, Captain Silman." Silman ignored him because a young man beside him came up with a mini photon computer. "Boss, this is a probe ship from the Norse Empire called Anvil Corporation. They look like crew members." When a probe ship appeared on such a remote planet, it was usually to collect data or materials. It was not a threat to bounty hunters like them. In fact, Songqing's spaceship had advanced technology and strong defense. With the configuration of this blazing shark, it was also not a threat to them. Seeing that Ding Meng's wristwatch also raised the light screen, Salman took a deep breath and said slowly, "Hello, little brother Ding. I see that you are not a citizen of the Empire. We are all trying to make a living. Let's put it bluntly first. We are also entrusted by our employer to find a place here. Once we find it, we will leave. As for what you want to do, I have no interest in knowing, and I don't want to know. It's best if we can cooperate, but if we can't, I hope that we can meet and part with each other politely." Chapter 121. Saying that they were looking for a place, Salman and his group went straight into the warship through the tunnel. It was obvious that the place they were looking for was inside the warship. As soon as they entered the tunnel, the young man with the photon computer immediately turned on his wristband to generate a 3D map. This map was completely different from the one drawn by the probe dogs. It did not show the entire warship, but instead started from the center of the gourd and curved downward, pointing to a green light marked deep underground. The light mark was obviously the destination. The hunter's map was simpler, more direct, and more practical. Ding Ming also took out his map. The map showed that the light mark was in the red area that Longming Randy was heading towards. Salman looked at Ding Ming with interest. "Little brother, your map is pretty good." Ding Ming shrugged. "I hope it won't affect your fortune." Salman smiled meaningfully. "Hunters like us earn money for our meals. We can't compare to big companies like yours. If we find any rare materials, it'll be enough to last us a lifetime." There seemed to be another meaning behind his words. Ding Ming could not help but smile. "That depends on what kind of place you're looking for." Salman pondered and said, "We're not interested in materials or anything like that." Ding Ming nodded. "Captain Salman, you're interested in profits, right?" Salman raised his head and laughed. "Brother, you're a straightforward person. You're indeed a straightforward person." Chu Shaoqing could also tell and quickly said, "Captain Salman, if you find the materials we're looking for, our company will reward you handsomely." Salman stared at her. "Little beauty, you're really pretty. I wonder what kind of reward your company can offer." This. Chu Shaoqing was at a loss for words. After all, she had never been in space and did not know the market at all. Ding Ming immediately raised a finger. "At least this much." Salman waved his hand. "Let's go, brothers. Let's go." The group quickly ran deeper into the tunnel. Chu Shaoqing was stunned and confused. "What does that mean?" Ding Ming said calmly, "He means that he'll accept our offer and allow us to follow behind them." Chu Shaoqing asked curiously, "How much is your offer?" Ding Ming said, 1,000 star coins. Chu Shaoqing hesitated. "Isn't it a little expensive?" Even though she was very rich, she knew the value of 1,000 star credits. An average family's annual expenses might not even reach this amount. Fortunately, Ding Ming explained, "It's not that expensive. The cost of a hunter's mission is not low either. The name Green Arrow Corps is worth this price. Miss Chu, let's follow them." Seeing him move, Chu Shaoqing had no choice but to follow him. She was now clear that staying still would inevitably cause dissatisfaction among the other teams. What kind of army is the Green Arrow Corps? Is it famous? Chu Shaoqing was very interested in these organizations in outer space. Ding Ming smiled and said, "I wouldn't say that they're very famous, but the Green Arrow Hunters do have their own merits." "Have you dealt with them before?" Chu Shaoqing asked. Ding Ming said, "This is the first time I've seen a bounty hunter from Green Arrow." Chu Shaoqing sighed. "Then it seems that they're quite famous." She was about to ask something when Ji Ming's voice suddenly sounded in the public channel of the communicator. All units, Randy is injured. The nearest team, please head over to check on him and provide assistance. Chengda's voice also sounded in the public channel. What's the situation? Long Ming replied. We're in an abandoned warehouse right now. There are monsters here, and Randy is injured. Chengda asked, how's the injury? Long Ming said, it's strange. The injury isn't serious, but can't be healed. Chengda asked, where's the medical device? Long Ming said, I brought it with me, but it's not working. Chengda asked, who's in the nearest team? Xin Jie's voice sounded. Ding Ming and Miss Chu have already gone over. Long Ming and Randy were actually right below the battleship's PC-35 area. Back then, it was unknown whether it was due to the self-destruction of the bamboo pole or the arrival of the solar eclipse, but the experiment hall was completely blocked. Ding Ming and the others had gone down from the side. They could clearly see that the robots had drilled out a vertical tunnel in the middle of the passage, and below the tunnel was a square hall. This hall was completely different from the experiment hall. The steel plates on the walls had completely corroded due to the passage of time, but the rows of worn-out alloy shelves in the hall were still standing. It was obvious that this was a warehouse used to store materials, but the ground had already become a pool. Long Ming was definitely not stupid. The moment he saw the existence of water, he should have been able to tell that this place was abnormal. Randy was sitting on the cargo platform in the northwest corner of the hall, grimacing in pain. The shoulder area of his jade light armor had been slashed open. There are monsters in the water, but I've already killed them. However, Randy is slightly injured, Long Ming explained. Chu Xiaoqing immediately went forward. How are you? Randy? Are you okay? Randy frowned. Miss Chu, I'm fine. The wound is very small, but I just feel uncomfortable. My whole body is sore. Chu Xiaoqing was also puzzled. Did the medical device not work? Long Ming spread his hands and said, it's just that strange. Logically speaking, it's just a flesh wound, but it just can't heal. Silman turned his head to look at Ding Ming. Young man, it seems that your companion is not in good health. Do you need her help? Ding Ming's gaze fell on Randy, but his expression was thoughtful. It's best if it's free. Silman laughed. Young man, you should have been around before. You know that there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Randy was unhappy when he heard that. Our green light, portable medical device is a high-end product from Anvil. It's not some unorthodox product. His words undoubtedly offended the hunters present. The young man walked up casually. Kid, let me take a look at it for you. A product is a product, and the wilderness is the wilderness. A good product might not be useful in the wilderness. Experience is more important to make a living in space. No matter how unhappy Randy was, he had to admit that the hunters who had been in space for a long time had undoubtedly more survival experience. It was impossible to carry equipment like a medical device with you all your life. Sometimes, in an emergency, you had to rely on others to treat the injury. The young man carefully observed Randy's wound and muttered, it's a neuron toxin. After saying that, he took out a small sprayer and sprayed at Randy's shoulder a few times. A small cloud of white mist immediately spread over the wound. Randy began to grimace in pain again, probably because of the pain caused by the healing mist. However, the pain did not last for long. Not long after, Randy twisted his arm. The young man chuckled. How is it? Do you feel better? Randy was a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and said softly, thank you. The young man looked pleased. My kaleidoscope oil can cure most toxins. If young man is interested, I can sell some to you. This group of hunters really talked about money every 3 sentences. Silman also turned to look at Chu Xiaoqing. Little beauty, can we calculate the cost later? It was difficult for Chu Xiaoqing to say no. She could only nod and thank them. Thank you, big brothers. The young man turned back to look at Silman. Boss, the coordinates show that it's here, but according to the employer's description, it doesn't look like it. Looks like there's no other way. Long Ming already knew what this group of hunters was doing from the public channel. He could not help but say, We didn't see anything on our way here either. Silman said in a low voice, "Let's split up and look for other passageways or rooms." Everyone was talking at once. No one noticed that Ding Ming's expression was very serious in the dark. Ding Ming activated his telekinetic vision the moment he entered the warehouse. Then, he saw very clearly that the skin on Randy's shoulder was like a shallow honeycomb. A fine green liquid was seeping out. It was very difficult to see it with the naked eye, let alone with the emerald light armor. The young man might have noticed the green poison, but he definitely could not see the changes on the skin. Little Rascal's voice was also very serious. "He's been poisoned by a mutated K virus." Ding Ming nodded. Little Four's back injury was exactly the same. The young man's treatment mist seemed to have cured the poison on the surface, but in his telekinetic vision, that strange poisonous green flower was still embedded in the flesh. It had just stopped taking root and sprouting. The mist only had a temporary effect of suppressing it. Although it could only suppress it, it was still very impressive. After all, it was suppressing a mutated K virus. Little Rascal suddenly said, "Ding Ming, you can actually save him." "Oh." Ding Ming was a little curious. "How do I save him?" Little Rascal said, "Your body is a genetic combination of the K virus. Ever since you constructed the first origin of your heart, your blood has been completely modified. Simply put, your blood is now an antidote. Not only can it cure all the derivative toxins related to the K virus, it can also cure many other complex viruses because the K virus itself is a particularly excellent virus source." Ding Ming said, "Then how do I cure him?" "It's very simple. As long as even a drop of your blood fuses into his blood, the poison will be completely eradicated very quickly. Even your saliva can cure the poison." Little Rascal's tone suddenly changed again. "But I suggest that you don't do that." The reason was very simple. Everyone's helmets had ion-scanning eyes. Everyone could see the real-time image. If he cured the poison in front of everyone, it would be very easy to expose himself. The other members probably did not know about the K virus, but between Ji Ming and Chengde, one of them would definitely know about it. As for whether Randy could survive in the end, that would all depend on his own luck. Of course, it was almost impossible for someone who had been poisoned by the mutated K virus to survive. As soon as he returned to Black Gold Base, the feeling of being in hell seemed to have returned with him. Ding Ming's heart immediately hardened. He did not care whether Randy lived or died. Sometimes, the price of being a good person was quite high, and the consequences were unpredictable. Ding Ming decided to wait and see. Chapter 122. The Green Arrow Hunters searched around for a while, but found nothing. Even when Claus and Star Art appeared in the warehouse, the group of people were still pointing at the map and discussing animatedly. What Claus and Star Art saw and heard was completely within Ding Ming's expectations. They did not find anything at all, so they had no choice but to approach this area. "What kind of place are you looking for?" Ding Ming quietly came to Salman's side and asked without batting an eyelid. It was taboo to inquire about a hunter's mission in private, but Salman's progress was not going well at the moment, and his mind was in a mess. If they could not find the place, they would not be able to complete the mission. If they could not complete the mission, then they would not be able to get the bounty. If they could not get the money, then everyone's trip would be for nothing. Salman turned on his wristwatch, and a three-dimensional image of an ancient money bag popped up on the screen. This was the bounty hunter logo of the Darknet branch of the International Space Network. The Darknet mainly targeted outer space black markets, bounties, items, and other illegal trading activities. After clicking on the image, a large number of densely packed data instantly appeared on the screen. These were the active bounty missions on the Darknet. Salman then clicked on the locked column, and the image quickly appeared. First was the interstellar map, and it indicated that the mission location was on the dead silent planet of the K8 galaxy. The coordinates were the location of the sinkhole. Then, the image changed and a circular room appeared. This room did not have any special features, and it was completely empty. However, right in the middle was an altar that looked like an ancient cauldron, and a jade green gem was floating above it. Finally, there was the mission description. The room is underground. What are the coordinates? Find the specific location of the room, record a video, and send the specific coordinates. The darknet system will automatically notify the employer, and the reward will be 50,000 star coins. This reward was actually not high among the various large and small bounty missions, but the employer's goal was obvious. It was definitely not for the location of the room, but for the gem in the image. But this thing doesn't look like a demon core crystal. Claus came over. His judgment was reasonable. A demon core crystal would not be so flat and smooth, and it did not look small either. This thing looked like a miniature version of Songqing's spaceship. Ding Meng could not help but ask, "Little rascal, what is this?" "I can't tell either." Little rascal's tone was helpless. What he provided was a virtual composite image, and there's too little information about it. There are thousands of these stones in my database, and most of them are ores. There's nothing special about them. Salman turned to look at Ding Meng. "Is this the material you're looking for?" Ding Meng shook his head. No, whether it was or not was not important. Salman was looking for the place, while Ding Meng and the others were looking for the object. The two did not conflict at all. "Little brother Ding, if you help us find it, we will reward you." Salman was a little frustrated. Based on his past experience, this 50,000 star coins mission could be completed within a day apart from interstellar flight. But now, it seemed like it was impossible to complete within a day. To a bounty hunter, a delay in time was equivalent to a loss. A team of 9 people wasn't considered small. The most important thing was that everyone had to earn money. Even if they completed the mission, each person would only receive 5,000 star coins. If they were delayed further, they wouldn't be able to earn much. Reward. Randy also came over. "Captain Salman, if we find this place, can you share some of that healing mist with me?" "That's not a problem." Salman glanced at him indifferently, but his heart was filled with disdain. "That's all there is to it. You're even interested in the special medicine. But this is normal. Seeing that these people are all obedient children, they probably followed this company's exploration ship to outer space to experience life." However, his disdain turned into surprise in the next moment, because Randy muttered, "If your employer is sure that the information provided is correct, then according to my current calculations, there is a possibility." "What possibility?" Salman was interested. Randy pointed at the central pool and said, "There's at least a 87% chance that the way out to other unknown areas is underwater." What kind of judgment was that? Salman was a little confused. "You guys are indeed obedient children who haven't seen the world. You really dare to speak without thinking and pretend to be experts." Ding Meng secretly asked, "Is there a problem with Randy's judgment?" This question wasn't directed at Little Rascal, but at Xinjie. Xinjie's voice quickly sounded from the communicator. "What Randy said is correct. He has practiced the linear calculation mental cultivation method. This kind of cultivation method allows a statistician to simulate a scene based on the current environment in their mind. Randy's originability index is over 2,000 points, so he can simulate at least 30 types of terrain. In theory, every type of terrain is possible, but since he gave you the specific probability, then this type of terrain is the most likely." Understood. Ding Meng turned off the communicator and turned to Chu Shaoqing. "I'll go down and take a look. You guys better wait for me here." Chu Shaoqing hurriedly said, "Let's go together." Ding Meng waved his hand. "It's best if you guys wait for me to check it out before coming down." It really wasn't convenient for him to say it out loud. If there were monsters underwater, then there was poison. The poison would spread easily in the water, and although the Jade Light armor could isolate it, it was hard to say what kind of monsters they would encounter. In fact, as soon as Ding Meng jumped into the water, the screen representing his first-person perspective on the main control panel began to show all kinds of colorful streaks, and the image became completely blurry. Jiming couldn't help but ask, "Did something malfunction again?" Xinjie's expression sank. "No, it seems like there's signal interference." Jiming was surprised. What kind of signal can interfere with the short-range ion transmission? This time, It was Ling Lan who answered. Under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be able to interfere, but they're currently 6,000 meters underground. The degree of connectivity is low, and the internal structure of the battleship is complicated. The scanning eye's transmission thread is limited. If there are other energy fluctuations, then our communication will be affected. Jiming turned to look at Xinjie. Is that so? Xinjie nodded. There is indeed such a possibility. Xinjie and Ling Lan's judgment was completely accurate. As soon as Ding Ming dove into the water, Little Rascal spoke up. Ding Ming, I detected a faint energy fluctuation. Ding Ming actually felt it as well. In his telekinetic vision, he saw rings of light spreading out in front of him, but strangely enough, this wasn't origin energy. Little Rascal's tone was also very surprised. This fluctuation seems to be some kind of technological energy source, but I've never seen this kind of energy source before. Its composition is very strange, and I have a hard time analyzing its composition. The source of the fluctuation was clearly underwater. The round hatch was embedded in the steel plate on the ground. It was one of those ancient mechanical turntables. Seeing that the metal handle was rusted beyond recognition, Ding Ming decided to just stomp on the hatch. As soon as the hatch shattered, a large amount of green liquid gushed out from within. Just by looking at the dark green color, it was obvious that the concentration of the liquid wasn't low. However, Ding Ming didn't need to dodge because he was a pure first-generation K virus. These mutated toxins posed no threat to him at all. Not to mention, he had the protection of the Jade Light armor. However, the scene inside the hatch gave him a solid shock. This was a vertical tunnel that led downwards. The tunnel was definitely soaked in poison, but there were all kinds of strange creatures clinging to the walls. The most typical of these creatures were the devil-faced monsters he had encountered before. As for the others, he couldn't name them at all. Let alone names, he couldn't even imagine what they were. Countless ugly and terrifying black monsters were entrenched in blood vessels like gangrene, densely occupying the entire tunnel. If the entrance above ground was the Hell's Gate, then this was the true Hell's Path. If it weren't for Ding Ming's strong mental fortitude, anyone else would have vomited just by looking at this scene. It was also at the moment when the hatch shattered that these creatures seemed to have been startled and opened their eyes one after another. In the darkness, thousands of pairs of eyes were probably only the size of pinholes. Although Ding Ming couldn't see them with his naked eyes, he could sense with his telekinesis vision that these creatures were all staring at him. Although their hostility was obvious, none of them moved. What's going on? Ding Ming was also shocked. It didn't feel good to be stared at by thousands of enemies. Little Rascal said, "You're a pure K virus gene source. Even if you're not their kind, they won't treat you as an enemy." Little Rascal's explanation confirmed Ding Ming's speculation when he first saw the mountain of corpses and bones. After the original creatures on this planet were infected with the K virus, they divided into two groups. One was the direct death that led to extinction, and the other was the dark underground creatures that mutated and became afraid of light. Little Rascal pondered and said, "Not only are they afraid of light, but they're also afraid of high temperatures. I think these things can only survive in an environment below 0 degrees Celsius. The current temperature is negative 20 degrees Celsius." Ding Ming couldn't help but ask, negative 20 degrees Celsius? But why isn't the water freezing? Little Rascal said, "That's because of the K virus. This isn't just water, but also poison. Poison can't freeze." Ding Ming thought for a moment, then said, "Fine, even if that's the case, the problem is how we're going to get through. These creatures have already blocked off the tunnel." Little Rascal said, "If they really are low-temperature creatures, Ding Ming, why don't you try circulating origin energy throughout your body? It might be effective." This method was to accelerate the rotation of the origin, allowing origin energy to rapidly circulate throughout his body and emit heat. After all, origin energy cultivators couldn't release origin energy out of thin air. Little Rascal's judgment was very accurate. As soon as Ding Ming activated his origin energy, the creatures in the tunnel shot up like birds startled by the twang of a bow. They quickly swam toward the other end of the tunnel, obviously sensing the heat. 3 origin points aren't enough. You need to increase the circulation speed, Little Rascal warned. Her detection system showed that the water temperature had only risen to 10 degrees Celsius. Ding-Ming also saw that only a portion of the creatures had swam away, but many of the octopus-like creatures were still stuck to the walls. The origin energy emitted by 3 origin points was far from enough, so he had to try activating a 4th origin point. However, the 4th origin point didn't cause a change in the tunnel, but in the warehouse. White steam began to rise from the pool in the warehouse, and then the temperature in the hall began to rise. In less than 5 minutes, the entire pool began to boil from the high temperature. The surface of the water began to churn, and waves of dark green energy began to rise from the surface of the water. Longming also felt the surge of origin energy. He stared blankly at the boiling water. What exactly is Ding-Ming doing down there? As soon as he said this, several of the young hunters from the Green Arrow Corps collapsed on the stairs. Obviously, they didn't have the Jade Light armor, so they had been poisoned. How could this be? The young hunter was also frightened by the scene in front of him. The pool had already changed color. It was no longer a pool of lifeless black water, but a strange pool of poison that was spewing out green smoke. Randy also stared at the churning pool in shock. As he stared, he felt dizzy, and his entire body became weak. He quickly collapsed as well. Chapter 123. Ding-Ming, Ding-Ming? Did you hear me? Please answer immediately. Please answer immediately. Ji-Ming's voice sounded anxiously in the public channel. However, the main control panel showed that Ding-Ming's communication thread had been completely cut off. Instead, Chengda answered him. Lan Xiao and I are already approaching the accident site. Everyone, hold on. Chu Shaoqing and the others were fine, but Silman and the other bounty hunters could not hold on any longer. Everyone could see that this was a gas chamber. Without any protective equipment, they could not stay here any longer. They could only retreat to the tunnel 1 level above. I'll go take a look. Chu Shaoqing stood up decisively. Miss Chu, let me go. Longming pulled her back. I'm also a thermodynamics user. It'll be easier to work with Ding-Ming. Take good care of Randy. My tempered system is better able to deal with all kinds of dangers. Chu Shaoqing knew that something was wrong. She definitely would not give this opportunity to Longming. She was most curious about the secrets hidden on this battleship. The military seemed to be lying, and it even attracted the bounty hunters. However, in this situation, it was better to find Ding-Ming first. At this moment, Ding-Ming had already emerged from the water through the tunnel. He was floating in the middle of a larger pool. When he looked up, he could see that this was a huge natural cave. It was big enough to accommodate several Songqing spaceships. However, there were numerous holes of various sizes among the rugged rocks. There were too many to count. Now, 2 things could be confirmed. One was that the creatures in the tunnel that were scared away by the heat had definitely entered these branching caves. The other was that their current location was no longer inside the battleship. I didn't expect there to be such a large space underground. Ding-Ming could not help but sigh. Little Rascal said, the energy fluctuation is getting stronger. Yeah, Ding-Ming nodded. The frequency of the halo spreading in his psychic vision was indeed getting higher and denser. I think the thing they're looking for is the source of this fluctuation. That being said, Ding-Ming suddenly had a very unique feeling. Just like when he first discovered the experiment hall, this place felt familiar, as if he had been here before, but he could not remember when. But this time, the feeling was particularly strong. However, it was different this time. His telekinesis vision had improved by leaps and bounds. The fluctuating halo was like a feedback signal, guiding Ding-Ming forward. He could not even remember how many caves and tunnels he had passed through. Finally, he entered a giant, semicircular tunnel. It's here, Little Rascal suddenly said. The fluctuations are coming from here. Ding-Ming also stopped in his tracks. This tunnel was obviously not naturally formed, but man-made. The walls were made of granite, smooth, and the rocks were almost seamless. The most surprising thing was that the walls were faintly emitting a green luster, which made the entire tunnel emit a pale green light. It looked strange and mysterious, and people who were in it felt like they were in a ghostly world. "But I can't see anything?" Ding Ming asked. The halo fluctuation in his psychic vision was indeed here, but there was nothing in the empty tunnel. It was so empty that it was scary. Little Rascal said in a low voice, "This is an unknown energy source. Its fluctuations and composition are beyond my knowledge. Ding Ming, this place is very strange. You have to be careful." At this moment, the symptoms from back in Black Old Base flared up again. Ding Ming felt his vision blur, and his vision became slightly blurry. It was as if an electric current had passed through his eyes, tearing his vision apart. This was the same for his psychic vision. "What's going on?" Ding Ming was clearly frightened. Logically speaking, after Little Rascal fused with him, this symptom should have been completely eradicated by the K virus. So why was it reappearing now? "Watch out for the middle," Little Rascal suddenly shouted. At the very center of the tunnel, a green dot of light appeared out of thin air, drifting toward him like a ghost fire from the underworld. "What the hell is this?" Ding Ming dodged to the side like a carp, and the ghost fire instantly shot dozens of meters away. Its speed could be said to be quite astonishing. The ghost fire seemed to be psychic, and after making a big turn, it suddenly turned around and shot back. Ding Ming naturally did not dare to get close to such an unknown thing. He casually pulled out the SWAT particle machine gun and pulled the trigger without hesitation. The sharp muzzle of the gun shot out a large number of bright electric particles, illuminating the tunnel as bright as day. Unfortunately, the electric particles passed through the green dot, and the green dot was not damaged at all. Instead, the tunnel entrance collapsed. The SWAT particle machine gun was not weak, and the entrance seemed to have been blocked. Little Rascal said, "Energy weapons are useless. Try something else." Seeing the green dot fly over again, Ding Ming threw the gun to the ground and dodged to the side. The green dot's reaction speed was not inferior to a human's, and it followed his trajectory and made a sharp turn. At this time, Ding Ming still had not gotten up, and in this critical situation, he could not care less. He quickly activated the origin and used the diamond star technique. The origin energy immediately formed a golden diamond that wrapped around his body. With a crisp ding, the green dot hit the mirror like a bullet hitting a steel plate and was immediately deflected. "That was close." Ding Ming let out a long sigh. Little Rascal's tone was still serious. "It hasn't been destroyed. The composition of this energy is too complicated. Even I can't analyze its proton composition." The green dot was indeed still there, but it no longer attacked. Instead, it slowly flew around the golden diamond, as if it was observing and analyzing the powerful defensive composition of the origin energy mirror image. After flying a few circles, the green dot suddenly retreated and then charged forward like a bolt of lightning. The inconceivable finally happened. The golden diamond, which could withstand Salazar's powerful attacks, could not withstand this small dot of light. Whoosh! This time, the light spot crashed into the mirror like an extremely hot melting point crashing into a layer of ice. A large piece of the mirror actually melted. However, the light spot did not crash into Ding Ming's true body. Instead, it stayed on the mirror and sizzled. The overall color of the golden diamond quickly faded and dimmed. Ding Ming and Little Rascal did not have time to be surprised, because the origin in their bodies was like a dam that had collapsed. Abundant origin energy poured out like a flood. Ding Ming felt his body weaken like a sack that had been emptied. "Hurry up and stop it. This thing is absorbing our origin energy," Little Rascal exclaimed. "It's also invading my control system. Hurry." Every time this happened, Ding Ming would be more alert and aggressive. Ignoring his weakened body, he quickly drew his sword, swung his hand, and slashed forward. He had practiced this move thousands of times when he was at the List Academy. He was confident that the dot of light would not be able to dodge this fierce attack, not to mention that he had injected origin energy into the ancient sword in an instant. The dot of light did not dodge this attack, but the sword did not hit it either. This was because the dot of light absorbed the sword in the blink of an eye, turned into a flash of light, and shot up Ding Meng's wrist, along his arm, shoulder, and neck. Finally, it flashed into his eye socket. At this moment, Ding Meng's vision completely changed. Many images flashed before his eyes. There were all kinds of images, some he had seen before, some he had not seen before, some he had experienced before, some he had not experienced before, people, scenes, events, planets, galaxies, outer space. A huge cluster of information was actually injected into his eye socket. This was even more exaggerated than the information that was injected into his armor. In just a few seconds, Ding Meng's vision turned black, and he did not know anything. However, the scene in the tunnel was particularly frightening. The green merged into Ding Meng's body, and Ding Meng's entire body was quickly covered in a green light. Just like when he was transformed by the K-virus, his entire body had turned into a human-shaped pupil of light, but this time, it was a green pupil of light. At the same time, Chu Shaoqing emerged from the water. She also curiously sized up this huge and strange natural cave. There were thousands of branching caves scattered everywhere. Only now did she understand why Randy was indispensable for this mission. In this situation, without Randy's detection dog and data calculation, she would not be able to determine which path Ding Meng had taken. In fact, Randy's current situation was not looking good. He was still lying on the steps of the warehouse, and several hunters from the Green Arrow Corps were lying next to him. The young man was jumping up and down anxiously. Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? You also know that it's not working? Long Ming looked at him coldly. In fact, the young man now knew that this was not an ordinary neuron toxin, but a very powerful toxic gas. His kaleidoscope oil antidote was completely useless. Chengde and Xiao Qiu also rushed over. Chengde asked anxiously, "Where's Miss Chu?" Long Ming said, "Miss Chu went to look for Ding Meng. She hasn't returned yet. How could you let her take the risk alone?" Chengde's tone was a little reproachful. "She should have waited for us." Xiao Qiu was silent. He squatted down and pressed his hand on Randy's shoulder. Not long after, a thin layer of light blue mist came out of Randy's shoulder. "Are you feeling better?" Xiao Qiu asked with concern. Randy panted and said, "Much better. I feel very cool. Thank you, Xiao Qiu." When Silman saw that Randy could actually sit up, he quickly ran over and lowered his head. "Miss, please be magnanimous and help my brothers. We will definitely thank you after this." Xiao Qiu also seemed to sigh slightly. "I only used ice energy to freeze the wound and temporarily relieve the pain. If you want to completely heal him, you probably have to return to the surface." She was not good with words, but everyone could still hear that if they wanted to heal him, they would have to send him back to the surface and rely on the advanced medical equipment on the spaceship. The problem was that Randy's shoulder was injured, and the wound could still be seen. However, the Green Arrow Corps had directly inhaled the toxic gas. Where was the wound? Was it possible to directly freeze the whole person? Salmon's expression was as if he had made a great decision. "If they freeze, then so be it. My brothers are all origin ability users, so their lives won't be in danger. This young lady, I've really troubled you. I'll thank you on their behalf." Chapter 124. The tunnel was still emitting that green luster. The green light reflected on Ding Meng's face, making his complexion appear extremely strange and terrifying. However, at this moment, his entire person had returned to normal, and he was no longer in his pupil state. After an unknown amount of time, Ding Meng slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he felt was that his entire body was extremely weak. He tried to circulate his origin energy, but he discovered that he could only rotate slightly. The origin energy in his body was seriously insufficient. That frightening speck of light had instantly seized most of the energy in his body. He then tried to move his limbs, but he discovered that there were no injuries. It seemed that the speck of light had not caused any harm to him. However, he quickly discovered that something was wrong. The caterpillar image of Little Rascal in his field of vision was normally wriggling and squirming, but at this moment, the caterpillar seemed to be completely stiff. It was lying there motionless, and Little Rascal seemed to have stopped operating. Little Rascal, Little Rascal. Ding Ming tried calling out twice, but Little Rascal did not respond. Could it be that this damned speck of light had caused Little Rascal to disappear? Ding Ming could not help but worry. If he really did not have Little Rascal's assistance, it would be the same as him losing one of his left and right arms. Ding Ming struggled to crawl up from the ground. At this moment, he finally discovered that something was wrong. The tunnel had been twisted. Yes, he was sure that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. The originally straight tunnel seemed to have been bent by an invisible hand, forming a sealed hemispherical hall. In the center of this room was a bell cauldron made of granite. A sparkling and translucent green gem floated above it. All the light in the room came from this gem. Ding Ming could tell at a glance that the bounty mission's destination on Slimon's wristwatch was this place. What was this thing? Ding Ming curiously walked over. For safety's sake, he did not touch it with his hands. Instead, he carefully observed it with his telekinesis vision. The gem appeared green to the naked eye, but in his telekinesis vision, the gem was constantly changing colors, as if it were a rainbow stone. As he walked closer, Ding Ming discovered that this rainbow stone was not a real gem, but a large mass of pure energy. The fluctuations it emitted seemed to be a mixture of origin energy, crystal flames, technological energy, and some other unknown energy. Even without using his telekinesis vision, he could sense its astonishing fluctuations with his body. It was like a huge electric current passing in front of him. He could feel all the hairs on his body standing on end without touching it. It was definitely a very powerful energy. There were naturally many ways to store energy. To put it simply, the existence of energy required a container. This container could be a human body, a server, a reactor, a power furnace, or even a battery or a crystal test tube. But no matter what method it was, it should not be like this. This mass of energy was so straight that it could be said to be an existence condensed together out of thin air. Moreover, its composition was so complex, and it did not have any temperature. No wonder Little Rascal said that she could not analyze it. What was this thing? Ding Ming simply reached out his hand. As soon as his fingers touched the surface of the energy mass, a green stream of water quickly rushed out. It flowed along his fingers, palm, and arm and rushed up to his shoulder. Although the speed was not fast, Ding Ming felt a familiar sensation, the same tingling sensation he felt when he first touched the venom. This was clearly the K-virus. However, the K-virus could no longer harm him. Ding Ming quickly withdrew his hand, and the green stream of water immediately disappeared without a trace. This was really strange. Ding Ming was really curious. What kind of energy was this mass of energy? It could actually contain the K-virus. After thinking about it for a while, Ding Ming finally suppressed his curiosity. No matter what the hell this thing was, the most important thing for him right now was to quickly absorb the origin energy. Who knew how many unknown things there were in the depths of the earth? Recovering his physical strength was the best way to ensure his safety. Of course, he still used the old method of absorbing energy. He sat down cross-legged and held his breath in meditation. His telekinesis field of vision shrank to a range of 20 meters, and he used his heart to sense the pure origin energy around him. He could sense the origin energy, but it did not come from the surrounding air. Instead, it came from the constantly changing colors of the energy mass next to him. In the past, when he absorbed origin energy, he first sensed the specks of light in the air, and then tried to absorb as much pure energy as possible. This time, however, it was completely the other way around. As soon as Ding Ming began to absorb energy, the rainbow stone seemed to have a mind of its own and actively poured a large amount of energy into Ding Ming's body. If one could describe it, the origin energy in the past was like a flower in the air that one could slowly pluck. Now, It was like a river that was being stuffed into one's body, regardless of whether one plucked it or not. The most peculiar thing was that this was not just a single type of energy. When the rainbow stone turned red, it transmitted the purest form of heat energy. This heat energy was purer than any origin energy Ding Meng had absorbed in the past. It was as if he had taken a bottle of top-grade polymerized nutrient solution. In the past, he had only used low-grade polymerized products. The reason for this was very simple. When the energy entered his body, his origin began to spin spontaneously. The speed was faster than any other time. His limbs and bones recovered more than half of his physical strength in an instant, and he did not feel weak at all. However, when the rainbow stone turned blue, the situation changed. The energy that rushed into his body was actually ice energy. Not only did his blood stop flowing, but even his origin was almost frozen. Ding Meng was shocked and hurriedly operated his origin to resist. Ice and fire were incompatible. This was a fact, but it also depended on the cultivation of the origin energy user. If one was strong enough, they would be able to gradually devour this ice energy and eventually assimilate it for their own use. Of course, this was a very time-consuming and laborious process. However, when Ding Meng finally managed to deal with this energy, the rainbow stone suddenly turned purple and a violent energy surged into his body again. It was like a violent dragon was roaming around in his body. Not only did it cause extreme discomfort and make him faint, but his internal organs also faintly felt like they were burning. Damn, this was electromagnetic energy. Ding Meng was scared out of his wits. He decisively shut off his telekinesis vision and stopped absorbing origin energy. Little Rascal's idea of a container had come true. As a thermodynamic origin energy user, Ding Meng had no problem absorbing other types of energy because he could use his own body heat to devour and assimilate them. However, if he absorbed too much at once, he would not be able to digest it. The key point was that the rainbow stone changed color so quickly and released such a large amount of energy. It was not something that Ding Meng could absorb with his current strength. It was only now that Ding Meng finally understood the function of this thing. This was probably a super energy body that could be shared by many origin energy users. No wonder the Empire's military was trying so hard to find it. If this thing was installed in the energy area at the bottom of the sensory hall, who knew how many sensory cabins it could strengthen? It probably wouldn't be a problem to strengthen tens of thousands of sensory cabins. It wouldn't require those origin energy users to enter a meditative state and painstakingly sense the surrounding energy, because it could continuously provide a corresponding amount of origin energy to all origin energy users. Thinking about it again, if the Empire's military obtained this thing, speeding up the cultivation of talents would not be a problem. If they used it well, it wouldn't be difficult to raise a few hundred origin energy users in a short period of time. Ding Meng was able to come up with this conjecture because of his own Diamond Star art cultivation technique. His body's capacity was already very large, but this rainbow stone could fill him up in a short period of time. Even if the composition of the origin energy was different, it was enough to show how much energy this super energy body contained. This was clearly a mini version of an artificial inverse crystal. No wonder. Ding Meng instantly thought through many of the questions he had before. The various oddities of this mission now had the most reasonable explanation. But so what? Ding Meng was too lazy to guess what the Empire's military was thinking. What he needed to do was first convert the electromagnetic energy in his body and then absorb the origin energy according to the rainbow stone's changing color. The rainbow stone's colors were fiery red, azure blue, dark green, orange yellow, vermilion purple, pure white, and pure black. Fiery red was definitely heat, azure blue was definitely ice, vermilion purple was electromagnetism, and dark green was most likely biochemistry. As for the other colors, it was unknown what kind of energy they corresponded to. Pure black was the color that Ding Meng was most curious about, but he didn't have the guts to try it out again. After figuring out the pattern of the rainbow color, Ding Meng sat cross-legged in peace and absorbed the heat energy. Since the seventh origin had yet to be revealed, Ding Meng used the rest of his origin energy to strengthen himself in addition to replenishing his energy. This time, not only did he strengthen his physical fitness and basic cultivation technique, but Ding Meng also tried to inject origin energy into the ancient sword that Chu Shaoqing had given him. This ancient sword infused with krypton gold was indeed a divine weapon among fighter jets. Ding Meng continuously injected origin energy into the ancient sword through his palm, but not only did it not melt, it didn't even increase in temperature. Little Rascal had said before that krypton gold had a melting point of several 100,000 degrees. The origin energy he was using was indeed insufficient. After thinking about it, Ding Meng decided to directly inject origin energy into the ancient sword. The temperature in the room suddenly rose and heat waves surged. However, the ancient sword did not change at all. Instead, it was Ding Meng's origin energy that flowed out like water. Forget it. I'll just continue replenishing my origin energy and meet up with Miss Chu and the others as soon as possible. As for the Rainbow Stone's super energy body, I'll let the Empire's military take it away if they can. Ding Meng had already thought this through. He didn't think that he could keep this thing for himself, even though it was extremely valuable and was extremely useful for cultivation. The reason was obvious. This thing was like a giant piece of cheese. Even if you gave it to yourself, you wouldn't be able to finish it. If you really wanted to keep it to yourself, you would be in a lot of trouble. It was better to let the military take it away. Since he was the one who had discovered this thing, it shouldn't be too much of a problem for him to raise his cultivation request to the military. After obtaining citizenship in the Norse Empire, his safety would be guaranteed. At the very least, the ambushers wouldn't dare to openly cause trouble for him anymore. Thinking of this, Ding Meng was undoubtedly very satisfied. He simply stood up and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, the caterpillar in his field of vision finally began to wriggle. He was just about to call out to Little Rascal when he discovered that in the lower right corner of his field of vision, an identical white caterpillar was also wriggling. Damn, what's going on? Ding Meng couldn't help but rub his eyes to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. There really were two caterpillars in his field of vision. Could it be that Little Rascal had evolved? Did it refine a clone? Chapter 125. Little Rascal, Little Rascal. Ding Meng tried calling out again. This time, there was finally a response, but the female voice was unusually cold and deep. Test semi-finished product ACT 5570. You. Ding Meng was stunned. Little Rascal, how did your voice become like this? I'm not Little Rascal. I'm the first core system. The voice answered him coldly. Ding Meng suddenly realized that the one who answered him was the caterpillar in the lower right corner of his vision. The extent of her squirming was obviously greater than the caterpillar in the lower left corner. Hello, ACT 5570. You can call me Xiao AI. The caterpillar took the initiative to explain. Ding Meng suddenly remembered that Little Rascal had once explained that Xiao AI and she were a symbiotic intelligent program that was created together. However, didn't Xiao AI die in the process of modifying herself? Xiao AI continued to explain. I didn't die. I just exhausted the energy of CAP075 and was transferred here. ACT 5570, because you have a 100% compatibility and have successfully fused with the K virus. I sense that you were nearby and have now successfully fused with you. This, Ding Meng was completely stunned. Was that green from before you? Wrong. Xiao AI corrected him. That wasn't a green. That was the intelligent energy carrier that represented my information program. It was the exclusive assistant of the first generation of the pure K virus, ACT 5570. You're already the only person who has fused with the K virus. So from now on, I am officially your assistant. In the end, you're just that green that Ding Meng muttered. My name is Ding Meng, not ACT 5570. Xiao AI's voice was very firm. You are ACT 5570, the 164,368th test subject of the K-virus experimental program, and the only successful one. Unfortunately, the degree of modification was too low, and it was far from the expected effect of the first main program. Ding Ming suddenly stopped talking. This time, he finally knew how many times the K-virus had been tested before. It was as high as 160,000 times. It was simply unheard of. Could it be that 160,000 lives have been lost? Xiao AI said, "No, human genetic life forms are only part of the experiment. But according to my calculations, the genetic life forms with the highest compatibility are silicon-based life forms. So, the experiment will be conducted mainly on humans." As expected of a core system, Xiao AI's thought process was quite mechanical. She was far less interesting than Little Rascal. What about Little Rascal? Ding Ming could not help but ask. Xiao AI said, "I've already shut her down." "Why?" Ding Ming asked in surprise. Xiao AI replied, "It's because her system isn't as perfect as mine. Furthermore, according to my tests on you, I discovered that you didn't make any subsequent modifications." Ding Ming said, "So you shut her down?" Xiao AI said solemnly, "Everything that is of no use to you should be eliminated. This is one of the core system's ultimate commands." When he heard the word eliminate, Ding Ming could not help but shudder. "Did you eliminate Little Rascal?" Xiao AI said, "No, I just stopped her from operating for the time being." Ding Ming pondered and said, "Can you release Little Rascal?" Xiao AI looked very confused. "You want me to restart her?" Ding Ming said, "Is that difficult?" Xiao AI said, "It's not difficult at all. But if you do that, you'll have two systems operating at the same time. This will cause a conflict." "What conflict can there be?" Ding Ming also looked very confused. Xiao AI said, "Conflict outcome, unknown. Release Little Rascal." Ding Ming was dissatisfied. Putting aside the help that Little Rascal had given him along the way, most of the time, it was Little Rascal who kept him company to relieve his boredom and make him feel less lonely on the journey. He could not get used to the sudden absence of Little Rascal. Xiao AI asked in return, "Are you sure?" Ding Ming said casually, "Didn't you say you were my assistant? You can't even do that?" Xiao AI immediately said, "Execute the operation instructions immediately." As soon as she said that, the caterpillar on the left shouted excitedly, "Haha, Ding Ming, I'm back." Little Rascal's voice was clearly very infectious. Every time he heard this girl next door cheer, Ding Ming felt a lot more cheerful. Isn't this Xiao AI? You're back to normal again?" Little Rascal asked in surprise. Xiao AI did not seem to have any emotions and answered rather stiffly, "Yes." Little Rascal was amused. "Haha, congratulations on your rebirth. From now on, we sisters can move forward hand in hand." Xiao AI said, "Please note that I'm the core system. You're just an auxiliary system." "Yo." Little Rascal was dissatisfied. "So what if you're an auxiliary system? You still haven't changed your bad habit of putting on airs." Xiao AI said, "This is one of Dr. Harsing's orders. I'm the core system." "Tsh," Little Rascal grumbled. "Ding Ming is now the ultimate artificial intelligence of the human body. Everything will be done according to his orders." Xiao AI's voice was still as calm as water. "I'm the core system." Little Rascal's temper was gone. "How long has it been? Can we talk about something else?" Xiao AI said, "I'm the core system. You're the auxiliary system." Little Rascal was angry. "I'm the core system. Get out of here." Xiao AI said, "I'm sorry. Your orders are ineffective against me. Also, I'm a female, so I can't get out of here." Little Rascal was speechless. "You're really so rigid. Can't you have a bit of fun in life?" Xiao AI said, "My duty is to execute the orders of main program number 1. Everything else has nothing to do with me." Little Rascal argued. "Then why did you emphasize the distinction between primary and secondary systems just now? Does that mean you also have a sense of hierarchy?" Xiao AI said, "The auxiliary system has no right to criticize how I operate." Little Rascal said, "I just want to criticize you." What can you do about it? Wah ha ha ha. Stop. Stop arguing. Dingming finally understood what Xiao AI meant by system conflict. The two of them were talking so fast and loudly that he felt a headache coming on. But at this moment, the two of them spoke again at the same time. Little Rascal said, detected technological energy fluctuations. Estimated arrival in 1 minute. Xiao AI said, detected danger approaching from the front. Threat level is low. As expected of two different systems. The two of them had different predictions. A part of the cave wall in the room suddenly collapsed, revealing a 3-meter-tall cave entrance. Dingming never expected that the people who walked in were actually Silman and that young man. Little brother Ding, you got here first? Silman was covered in mud, and there were some abrasions on his face. Clearly, he had suffered a lot to get here. The young man jumped up and down with his mini quantum computer in hand. Boss, it's here. We found it. Silman looked around the room and immediately activated his wrist device to scan. It's this damn place. Finally, it's done. Sigh. Seeing his gloomy expression, Dingming could not help but ask, what's wrong? The young man also lowered his head and said, a few of our brothers have been poisoned. We don't know why, but this poison is very strong. We can't cure it. Dingming thought to himself, it'd be strange if you could cure it. However, he did not say anything because Silman was walking over. He was obviously attracted by the green energy in the center. What is this? What a strong fluctuation. Dingming said, I suggest that you don't touch it casually. Why? Silman stared at him. Dingming naturally could not explain the reason for the K-virus to him. I feel that before we figure out what this is, it's better to wait and see. Silman suddenly smiled meaningfully. You think I don't know what this thing is? You know. Dingming was a little surprised. Silman said with a straight face, this is the power source. The power source was the energy released by the silver core stone inside the warship. However, the power source in front of them had clearly been diluted for a very long time. Relatively speaking, the energy was already very weak. That's not the power source. A voice came from the entrance again, but this voice sounded very weak. That's a mixed energy amplification. Solomon turned his head and saw Long Ming supporting the limping Randy as they slowly walked in. Behind them were Chu Xiaoqing, Star Art, and Claus. Everyone looked dejected. It was obvious that it wasn't easy to find this place. This also explained why Silman and the other two had arrived first. Randy's condition was already quite serious, but it was impossible for them to find this place without Randy. A mixed energy amplification? Silman could not help but laugh. You really think you can fool me with a random name? Randy had already sat down on a piece of rock and was panting as he said, it's true that it's the power source, but after being shelved for so long, it has been contaminated with a portion of origin energy and unknown energy. So it should be a mixed energy cough cough. He coughed as he spoke. Dingming noticed that the saliva that Randy coughed out had a faint green tinge to it. It seemed like the virus had already spread deep into his body. Randy, don't talk so much. Get some rest, Xing Yi said with concern. She even took out a healing agent. Dingming did not say anything because he was still waiting for the last two people to arrive, Chengda and Xiao Qiu. However, Xiao AI was the first to speak. They're carrying energy weapons, and, at the same time, they have a very strong origin energy fluctuation. If they're gathered together, they'll pose a very high threat to you. I suggest you get rid of them as soon as possible. As soon as she spoke, Little Rascal naturally did not want to be left behind. Haha, silly Xiao AI, these are all Dingming's teammates. What kind of threat can they pose? Xiao AI's tone was still stiff. Teammates are all unreliable. As long as there's any threat, you should get rid of them immediately. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Little Rascal argued. According to your idiotic logic, the number of people Dingming has to deal with is as vast as the ocean. There are so many that you can't even count them all. Don't tell me you're going to kill every single one of them? Xiao AI said, exactly. Little Rascal said, I have nothing to say to a boring guy like you. Xiao AI said, that's why you can only ever be a support system. Don't argue. Ding Meng's gaze was fixed on the cave entrance. Both of your words make sense, but I'm afraid we don't have the final say on who to get rid of. Chapter 126. When Changde came in, his eyes lit up because the green energy was too eye-catching. It was hard not to notice it. Randy and Silman's argument did not stop. Changde glanced at Silman and said, "Captain, you found the place and completed the mission. As for whether this thing is a power source or a hybrid, it's not important to you, right?" Silman pursed his lips and agreed. However, he stood still and did not seem to have any intention of leaving. Changde sighed and said, "Your brothers are still outside. If you don't mind, carry them to our ship and check them on a medical bed. I wish them good luck." Silman could not refuse this suggestion, but he still did not move. Changde's eyes quickly became alert. "What? You don't want to leave?" Silman waved his hand and smiled. "Don't misunderstand. I just want to hear your opinions. How much can this thing be worth?" Changde was expressionless. "It's not worth much. If it's not worth much, why did you go through so much trouble to find it?" Only Ding Meng could ask such a question. Changde frowned. "What do you mean?" Ding Meng said calmly. "What I mean is simple. The patrol fleet sent us to the edge of the TCP-121 nebula and then transferred to the Songqing spaceship. On the surface, it looked like they didn't want to cause a misunderstanding with the Federation. What about in reality?" Star Art could not help but ask. Ding Meng said, "That's the problem. Sent us here? What kind of people are we? We're just a group of students. What can students do?" Star Art said, "Aren't we here to salvage bones? Then have you seen any bones along the way?" Ding Meng asked coldly. Star Art was speechless. Clore could not help but say, "Ding Meng, you mean that the military is really looking for this green thing?" Ding Meng looked at Changde. "Then we'll have to ask Sergeant Changde if that's the case." Changde's expression was originally extremely ugly, but at this moment, he let out a long sigh. "Students, I'm really sorry. The military doesn't want more people to come into contact with this thing, so they hid it from everyone before. I hope everyone can understand." His words undoubtedly confirmed Ding Meng's suspicions. Chu Shaoqing asked, "Then what is it?" This time, Changde ignored this question. He turned to Xiao Qiu and said, "Go and take down this hybrid?" "Okay." Without another word, Xiao Qiu walked to the center and extended his hand toward the green energy body. It was exactly the same as when Ding Meng came into contact with it. A green water flow quickly surged out from the surface of the energy body and slowly flowed to Xiao Qiu's arm. However, Xiao Qiu's arm was blue. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that her arm was wrapped in a layer of solid ice. The water flow only spread through the ice and did not touch her skin. Suddenly, the strength of the water flow increased. The blue layer of ice seemed to be unable to withstand the intensity and exploded into pieces with a bang. Xiao Qiu was also shaken and staggered a few steps back. But at this moment, Ding Meng's heart sank. The ice shards contaminated with the cave virus splashed everywhere. Chu Shaoqing and the others were too close and could not react in time. They were all hit by the ice shards and were all caught off guard. They screamed and retreated. At the same time, an even more shocking scene occurred. Changde somersaulted into the air and swung his palm straight at Xiao Qiu. Before the palms arrived, the ice origin energy formed an extremely cold spherical force field that firmly trapped Xiao Qiu inside. This was the most standard dark ice annihilation palm. Moreover, the wind from the palms was faintly blue, proving that he had practiced this technique to a considerable degree. But unfortunately, all of this seemingly destructive power disappeared in the blink of an eye. Little Qiu didn't even turn his head. Instead, he turned around and waved his palm towards the sky. It was the same ice annihilation palm, the same blue palm wind, and the same bone-chilling ice origin energy. Like a wave on the sea, it instantly swallowed up Changde's palm energy. Xiao Qiu used an even more ferocious method to meet Changde's palm head-on. With a muffled bang, Changde flew backward like a kite with its string cut. He crashed into the rock wall and fell down. When they looked again, the blood from the corners of Chung Da's eyes and nose had frozen. The only parts of his body that could move were his hands. But looking at the extent of his wrist distortion, the bones were probably broken. Chung Da curled up on the ground. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Ew! His trembling voice suddenly stopped because a layer of ice had appeared on Xiao Qiu's arm again. This time, she simply flung her arm. The layer of ice shattered into countless sharp ice arrows that flew straight at Chung Da. Chung Da's face could no longer be seen. It was like a bloody cake that had been cut open. It was unbearable to look at. In fact, it was difficult for Chu Shaoqing and the rest to look at him directly. At this moment, everyone felt weak and powerless. Waves of tingling sensation spread throughout their bodies, and everyone collapsed. Meanwhile, Randy was already lying on the ground, unconscious. Green saliva flowed out of his mouth, making him look like a dying tortoise on dry land. Silman and the young man were not affected, but they were dumbfounded. All of this happened in almost 10 seconds. They did not understand why this group of people suddenly had internal strife. At this moment, Xiao Qiu did not have any trace of her weak and frightened image. She stood in place coldly and stared coldly at Ding Meng. She said coldly, "You are very calm." Ding Meng's expression also became thoughtful. "At first, I also suspected that there was something wrong with you. But when I saw you attack just now, I was sure that you were the one who attacked the mercenary group." Xiao Qiu said in surprise. "Oh, let's hear it. I value your opinion, Ding Meng." Ding Meng said, "You are not an origin energy user. It should be said that you are someone who is far above this level. Moreover, you are very powerful." Xiao Qiu said, "How did you know?" "I've only just noticed it," Yi Zichen replied. Ding Meng also stared at her. "When you infiltrated Qingxi Farm, you hid your strength and gave me the wrong impression that you were very weak. However, that is not the case." Xiao Qiu said, "Then what do you think it should be?" Ding Meng said, "Every night, you deliberately circulated and released a portion of ice-type origin energy. Moreover, you released more and more of it each time. This made me think that you could cultivate without the induction cabin. Moreover, your cultivation progress was very fast. This proves that your foundation is very deep and that your control of origin energy has already reached the level of perfection." "I can't say that it has reached the level of perfection," Xiao Qiu calmly replied. "However, it is very good that you have such a way of thinking. It also confirms my guess." Ding Meng sighed. "Yes, I have indeed fallen into your trap. You came for the K-virus, and you came prepared." Xiao Qiu also seemed to be sighing. "I also know that I went a little overboard with that palm strike just now. I most likely cannot hide it from your eyes. However, the people of the Empire are always a source of trouble. If we don't get rid of them in one go, I'm afraid that a long delay will only lead to more trouble." Ding Meng said, "I don't know. Do you still remember? I asked you before. Did you stay in the odd-numbered refugee camp on Planet Thorns?" Xiao Qiu smiled. "Of course I remember. Since I want to get close to you, I have to do my homework. The odd-numbered refugee camp on Planet Thorns is for women, while the even-numbered refugee camp is for men. The only reason you asked this question is because you yourself came out of the refugee camp." Ding Meng pondered and said, "What kind of people were sent out of the refugee camp?" "I'm sure you know." Of course she knew. Imbeciles, deformed people, inferior humans, interstellar refugees, Federation felons. These people were all gathered together. That was why there was such a terrifying and abnormal place of exile like Black Gold Base. Ding Meng asked in return, "On the surface, you look like you came out of the refugee camp. You look sallow and malnourished. You don't have any decent clothes, and you even have a burn scar on your face." Xiao Qiu said, "So what?" Ding Meng sighed. "You act like a refugee, but you are actually not a refugee at all." Xiao Qiu said, "Oh." Ding Meng said, "I asked you before. Which exile planet were you sent to in the Federation? The answer you gave me was the K6 Catterdam Star Group's AO-XIN concentration camp." Xiao Qiu frowned. "Is there a problem with that?" "There's no problem." Ding Meng stared at her and said seriously, You did your homework well, but unfortunately, you made a mistake. The AOXIN concentration camp does not imprint their imprints on their lips, but on their wrists. Do you know why? Because they are there to prevent refugees from escaping. If the imprint is imprinted on their wrists, it will be difficult for them to wear the wristwatch in the future. Xiao Qiu suddenly remembered that when Salazar arrived that night, Ding Meng had been staring at her hands. So this was the real reason. Ding Meng continued. Of course, this alone does not prove that there's a problem with your identity. Xiao Qiu sneered. Do you think there's a flaw in my identity? Ding Meng also sneered. Not only is there a flaw, but there's a lot of it. Xiao Qiu said, go on. Ding Meng said, although you have been working with old you in the fields for a week, according to my secret observation, you do not look like the kind of person who knows how to work. Xiao Qiu retorted, do you think only people who know how to work are real refugees? Ding Meng let out a long sigh. Her tone was full of emotion. You don't understand. Those refugee laborers are already in a lot of pain. If there's even a slight chance of survival, let alone working hard, they would even fight to the death. Do you think of that kind of person? Xiao Qiu was silent. Ding Meng continued. The most important thing is your hands. Look at your hands. They are so abnormal. Xiao Qiu's face darkened. She finally knew where she had gone wrong. She had disguised almost everything about her appearance, but she had not disguised her hands. Because her hands were too white, too tender, and too clean, like a flawless work of art. There was no flaw to speak of, not even a scar. It was also because she cherished her hands that she did not disguise them before she set off. It was not because she was careless, but because it was a matter of habit. It was difficult for a person to change a habit they had developed over many years. Therefore, her hands were like the slender, jade-like hands of an entertainment star. They were also like the slender fingers of those rich young ladies. They were even more like the soft and fragrant hands that beautiful women were usually proud of. In any case, no matter what they looked like, in short, the laborers from the refugee camps would definitely not have such hands. Even a beauty like Chu Xiaoqing had calluses on the edges of her hands because of long-term martial arts practice. Xiao Qiu could not help but sigh. So you began to suspect me? Chapter 127. Ding Meng said, this only proves that your background is suspicious, but it can't prove your identity. Xiao Qiu said proudly, you want to know my identity? I'm afraid that's impossible. Ding Meng said, but not long after you arrived at Clear Creek Farm, the people from the assault team followed. How would they find my location so accurately? At the very least, you can't get rid of the suspicion. Xiao Qiu said, it's very easy to find you. Just go to Christine Academy and you'll find out. Ding Meng sneered. I almost believe the act you put on when you found Lei Bao. Sadler's brother used Sadler's whip to deal with me. With the assault team's meticulous and cautious style, how could they be so careless as to brazenly expose their background? This is not your style. This was indeed not their usual style of doing things. Salazar was sent by Jiahua, and Fears did not approve of this plan from the beginning. In the end, there was indeed a problem. From this, it could be seen that the saying was correct. Don't be afraid of gods, but be afraid of pigs. At this moment, Xiao Qiu simply admitted it openly. Yes, I really didn't think of that. Ding Meng stared at her. So you simply took action against your allies and made the best of it. At that time, I almost believed that there was nothing wrong with you again. Xiao Qiu said, Julie, Sadler, Marshall, and the others' methods were too crude and arbitrary. There was no technical content, so I was thinking of using a gentler method to get close to you. Ding Meng looked at the people around him who were lying on the ground and panting. I'm afraid that you guys have already found out about this Imperial military mission. You followed me to the International Space Station and took advantage of the situation to return a black gold base. Maybe all of this was planned by you guys. Xiao Qiu finally showed a surprised expression. She murmured, now I'm sure of one thing. You've been to so many places in outer space, and you're still alive today. It really isn't luck. Ding Meng continued, in a world of battlecraft combat, your ID is Ice Plum. To be able to successfully register with these two words, You either registered very early on, or you're a very special person. But no matter who you are, this ID is enough to show that you are not a normal person. I think Sergeant Changda was also suspicious when he saw your ID, so it is not hard to explain why the first person you wanted to deal with was him. Xiao Qiu glanced at the corpses in the distance and sneered. Do you think I don't know? When this person put me in the same group as him, I knew that he was already suspecting me. Ding Meng said, and the area you went to was PC-35. At that time, I knew something was wrong. Xiao Qiu said, it's a pity that all of this is just your wishful thinking. Ding Meng said, you're wrong. You've exposed the biggest flaw. Xiao Qiu could not help but ask, what flaw? Ding Meng said, this underground warship is too clean. Xiao Qiu said, too clean? Ding Meng sighed and said, on the day of the solar eclipse, I think there were still a lot of laborers underground. They didn't have time to escape to the surface. When the monsters broke out of the ground, even if they weren't eaten, they would have been buried by the landslide. But when we came here, we couldn't even find a shovel. This means that before we came here, this place had already been cleaned up. Other than the people from the assault regiment, I really can't think of anyone else who would do something so boring. So, the only explanation is that you knew we were coming and made preparations in advance. Xiao Qiu stared at him for a long time before shifting his gaze to the green energy body. Do you know what this thing is? Ding Meng frowned. Is it not a hybrid? Xiao Qiu said word by word. This is the real memory of the K-virus. These words were so shocking that even Little Rascal did not say anything this time. Xiao Qiu continued. There are so many mutated K-virus creatures underground. What do they rely on to survive? It's this. The special energy fluctuations they produce can only be found by creatures carrying the K-virus. Previously, all the signs indicated that you had successfully mastered the K-virus, so the only way was to bring you back here and let you find it for us. Little Rascal suddenly shouted, she's lying. Xiao AI's voice was very low. But there's nothing wrong with the theory, she explained. Little Rascal was anxious. No, the K-virus is Dr. Harksini's great invention. We can't let someone like her take it away. Ding Meng, go and kill her. This time, the two sisters' views were very much the same. Xiao AI also said, correct, eliminate her immediately. Unfortunately, Xiao Qiu suddenly asked Salman, why aren't you leaving? Salman and the young man had long been confused by Ding Meng and Little Rascal's conversation. How could they answer her sudden question? A strange smile appeared on Xiao Qiu's face. Captain Salman, let me answer this question for you. You clearly found a place and uploaded the video, but the system did not reply to you that the mission was successfully completed. Salman forced a smile. Maybe the signal here is not good. The system's instructions are delayed. Maybe it will be received in a while. Miss, little brother Ding, I'll take my leave first. He had no choice but to leave. He had already smelled a huge danger signal from the content of the two's conversation. This was a pool of deep water, and he could not afford to get involved. It was better to find a chance to slip away. However, Xiao Qiu's next words made him stop in his tracks. The system has already received the video you uploaded. It's just that the employer has not given the confirmation order. Salman could not help but ask, how do you know? Xiao Qiu did not say anything else. Instead, she raised the screen on her wristwatch. The first thing that popped up on the screen was a three-dimensional mirror image of a money bag. It was indeed the bounty hunter system on the darknet. Next, Xiao Qiu clicked on one of the many missions. The image was the one that Salman had shown to Ding Meng earlier. The green gem in the depths of the dead silent star of the K8 system. It indicated that the mission had been completed. The employer only needed to press the confirmation order, and the system would issue a reward of 50,000 star coins. Salman cried out involuntarily, so you're the employer? Xiao Qiu smiled meaningfully. Captain Salman, I also know that your rundown place has not had any supplies enter the port for the past month. If you don't have this money, a lot of people probably won't be able to survive, especially the little brother next to you. He has the old and young at home, and his family of 5 is waiting for the nutrient solution to save their lives. The young man was already dumbfounded. His face was pale, and it was obvious that Xiao Qiu had hit the nail on the head. Salmon hissed, "But we've already completed the mission according to your requirements. Why aren't you sure?" Xiao Qiu smiled. "The system gave me a confirmation deadline of 3 days. I can wait for 72 hours before confirming." Salmon was furious. "But my people can't afford to wait." "What does it have to do with me if you can't afford to wait?" "It's just that." Xiao Qiu changed the topic. "It's not impossible for me to confirm now. If you do as I say, I'll add an additional 50,000 star coins." Even though he knew that she would make some bad demands, since things had already gotten to this point, Salmon could only take a deep breath. "What do you want me to do? Tell me." Xiao Qiu smiled as she looked at Ding Meng. "I want you to kill him right now. This isn't difficult for you." Salmon slowly turned to face Ding Meng. Ding Meng immediately felt a powerful surge of origin energy. This Salmon was actually a pure thermodynamic origin energy user. Ding Meng suddenly smiled. "In all honesty, do you think you can kill me?" Salmon's expression was complicated. "In all honesty, I don't want to kill anyone. Whatever grudges you guys have, it has nothing to do with me. What I want is money." Ding Meng sighed. "Then do you think money or your life is more important?" Salmon gritted his teeth. "Both are important." Ding Meng said, "If you don't have your life, what use is money?" "What do you mean?" Salmon stared at him. Ding Meng said, "What I mean is very simple. If you don't save your poison brothers outside, I'm afraid they'll really die." Salmon said, "Can your spaceship save them?" "It's not our spaceship that can save them." Ding Meng corrected him. "I can save them, and only I can save them." Salmon was obviously hesitant. "Really?" Ding Meng didn't answer him. Instead, he slowly walked to the northeast corner of the hall. At this moment, Chu Xiaoqing was curled up on the ground. The poisoned ice shards that Xiao Qiu had purposely shattered earlier had penetrated the jade light armor's mask. The poison had seeped into the skin of her neck. Half of Chu Xiaoqing's face was green, and she was completely exhausted. If it weren't for the healing mixture suppressing the poison, it would have already spread to every part of her body. Little Rascal had already detected Chu Xiaoqing's data. Weakened 72%, poisoned 29%. Ding Meng could ignore the life and death of others, but he couldn't be indifferent to Chu Xiaoqing. Thus, Ding Meng squatted down and hugged Chu Xiaoqing's waist. "Miss Chu, I'm sorry." After saying that, he lifted the other party's mask and bit Chu Xiaoqing's neck. As soon as his lips touched the honeycomb-like green skin, he immediately felt a burning sensation like an electric current. This was the feeling of being poisoned by the cave virus. However, the burning sensation didn't last long, and it was replaced by a cold sensation. Clearly, his saliva had taken effect. Sure enough, the green color above Chu Xiaoqing's neck gradually faded. Her face slowly turned red, and she gradually regained her consciousness. Xiao AI said in a low voice, "The target's poison level is weakening, but her weakened state is still very high." Little Rascal, on the other hand, shouted happily, "Ha! Ding Meng, you finally kissed the pumpkin butt. How was it? Doesn't it feel good?" It would be strange if it felt good. Ding Meng never imagined that his first intimate contact with the opposite sex would actually be kissing a virus. What a pervert. Chapter 128. Seeing Ding Meng cure Chu Xiaoqing's poison in such an inconceivable way, Silman and the youngster were stunned speechless, especially the youngster. He couldn't believe what was happening in front of his eyes because it didn't conform to medical principles at all. Xiao Qiu hadn't moved this entire time. Only now did she smile. "I already said that my conjecture wasn't wrong, and now it's even more confirmed. You really did control the cave virus. Not only are you fine after coming into contact with the virus, you can even cure it." Ding Meng stood up and spat out a mouthful of light green saliva. Then he said to Silman, "I advise you to hurry up and leave. Bring your poison brothers back to the surface and wait for me. If I'm alive, I'll definitely save them. If I'm not alive, then they won't be able to live either." Silman turned around and ran toward the exit without another word. The youngster followed closely behind. It was still the same old saying, no matter how big the world is, your own life is still the most important. At this time, Xiaoqiu didn't care about Ding Meng anymore. She opened her palm and pressed it against the energy body. It looked like she was silently injecting energy into it, and the energy body seemed to change color slightly. What is she doing? Ding Meng couldn't help but ask. Xiao AI said in a low voice, she's injecting ice origin energy. This will weaken the energy fluctuations of the energy body and prevent it from rebounding like before. She probably wants to take the energy body away. The probability of this is over 60%. Little Rascal immediately said, we can't let her take it away. This girl is too hateful. Xiao AI said, she can't take it away. The energy of the energy body is too great. It's not something a human can contain. Little Rascal said, are we just going to watch her play tricks like this? Xiao AI said, since it's a trick, then let her play. In any case, it's the same as not playing at all. The result will be the same. Little Rascal was angry again. No, we have to do something. The two of them started arguing again, but Ding Meng didn't have time to pay attention to them because Chu Xiaoqing could barely stand after taking a bottle of nutrient solution. Although she had been poisoned before, she could still feel what had happened during this period of time. For a moment, she was filled with emotions, but she couldn't say anything. In the end, she was still a student, and she knew too little about the dangers of the outside world. She couldn't have imagined that the military mission she took so seriously was actually a complicated trap set up by the enemy. Ding Meng. Chu Xiaoqing grabbed Ding Meng's arm and said seriously, thank you. Thank you. This thank you contained too many emotions. In addition to gratitude, there was also an element of admiration. Sometimes a person's strength was not only reflected in their martial prowess. Experience, vision, and intelligence were also very important components. Ding Meng helped her sit down. Miss Chu, you're still very weak. We'll leave after you rest for a while. But Meng's Meng, she couldn't help but gasp. But, of course, of the with the people, with or not. Look, his of Meng his say, please. Chu Xiaoqing didn't have such a tough heart. At least save Randy. He's not a bad guy. I promise. Ding Meng's expression was complicated. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he looked up and asked, are you sure? Chu Xiaoqing was stunned by his question, but she still nodded slowly. Ding Meng nodded and got up. Okay, wait here. Randy's was very serious. His was on his shoulder. Meng Chao could clearly see with his psychic vision that the poison had already seeped into his heart and was rushing up to his brain. He was a statistician. Once the poison completely infected his brain, it would be useless even if he was saved. Therefore, saliva couldn't be used to save Randy. Ding Meng cut his ring finger with his fingernail and sprinkled a few drops of blood onto Randy's shoulder. Then, he looked to his left. Xing, he was also unconscious. Her wound was in the center of her forehead, but the infection wasn't too serious. Ding Meng said, they're not weak. They're unconscious in less than a minute. Why is the mutated K virus this time so powerful? Xiao AI explained, the virus contained in the energy carrier is far more powerful than the monster carrier virus you were infected with. They're still quite strong. If they were ordinary people, they would have been dried up. Ding Meng nodded. After sprinkling a drop of blood on Xing Yi, he got up and walked over to Long Ming and Claus in the distance. Claus was lying on the ground. When Ding Meng approached him, he didn't immediately squat down to detoxify him. Instead, he did something that no one expected. He raised his leg and stomped on Claus's back. Almost at the same time, Long Ming, who had been lying unconscious on the side, suddenly opened his eyes. Without any warning, he shot up and threw a punch through the air. This was the most powerful punch Ding Meng had ever seen since he came into contact with origin energy. This was because Long Ming's entire body shot forward like an arrow. His body was in front, and his fist was in the back. The fist hadn't arrived, but the strong wind had already rolled up the granite on the ground, forming a whirlpool. There was even a faint glow of fire in the whirlpool. It was obvious that origin energy had raised the heat to a very high temperature. This flame energy rushing fist couldn't even be touched, let alone be blocked. However, Ding Meng had no choice but to block it. The distance was too close, and Long Ming's attack was too sudden. Boom! The two enormous forces collided in the hall, causing an explosion that sent countless stones and sand flying. Long Ming's fist collided with Ding Meng's palm. He was fine, but Ding Meng was forced to slide back more than 10 meters. His heels knocked the stones all over the place. However, Ding Meng wasn't the one who was shocked but Long Ming. This was because he didn't use one punch, but two. The one that rushed out was the flame energy rushing fist, and the one that hit Ding Meng's palm was the flame energy penetrating force. He was able to repel Ding Meng because he had combined the whirlpool and the strength of his fist to create a 1-inch punch. However, Ding Meng, he was still standing there, perfectly fine. Ding Meng's gaze fell to the ground. On the ground, a white electric current as thick as an arm tore through the stone floor, making cracking sounds. It followed the trajectory of Ding Meng's retreat and exploded as if it had grown eyes. There was another loud boom, and a huge crater appeared on the ground. 10 seconds later, the smoke dissipated. Ding Meng's entire body was charred black, as if he had been blasted. There was even smoke coming out of the top of his head. The 3 consecutive heavy blows were really unexpected. Chu Shaoqing had already rushed over without caring about anything else. She hissed, "Are the two of you crazy? Are you attacking your own people?" Long Ming and Claudio stood side by side, staring at her coldly. There was no sign of them being poisoned or unconscious. However, Ding Meng, the black man, actually opened his mouth to speak. His voice was unusually calm. "The two of them aren't crazy. I should have known that there must be a spy in our team. They aren't our own people." Spy? Chu Shaoqing couldn't accept this term at all. Long Ming was an outstanding master in the Leaston Academy, and the academy was also focusing on training him. He had a promising future. She couldn't figure out why Long Ming was a spy. If the reason for Long Ming's betrayal was unknown, then it was even more difficult for Claudio to figure out. He and Chu Shaoqing were classmates in elementary school, and they had maintained a good relationship for many years. There was no reason for him to side with the enemy. In fact, Chu Shaoqing didn't know anything about the enemy at all. Xiao Qiu was indeed the enemy, but the question was, what kind of enemy was this? What was her identity? Everyone was at a loss. "Let me answer you." Xiao Qiu, who was in the middle of the hall, suddenly spoke. At this moment, she was still injecting ice energy into one of her palms. The green color of her energy body had become much lighter, and it was faintly blue. This Claudio is very talented. Unfortunately, the resources of the Superconductor Academy in Suifeng Oasis are limited, so it's difficult for him to use his potential. However, if he transfers to a higher school in the Empire, it's completely different. He's very likely to be very strong. Chu Shaoqing looked at Claudio in disbelief. "You're helping him because of this?" Claudio's face darkened, and he didn't answer. The person who answered was still Xiao Qiu. "He's not helping me. He's helping himself. After all, his family isn't as rich as yours, so it's almost impossible for him to transfer to a better school. However, after he killed Ding Meng, this impossible will become possible." Ding Meng suddenly laughed. His laughter was very meaningful. "Anyway, a citizen of the Empire won't have to bear any responsibility for killing a galactic refugee. Why not do such a good thing? If it were me, I might have turned on him even faster. When I return to the Empire in the future, I can proudly announce that I've made a great contribution to the military." In the face of Ding Meng's mockery, Claudio's face couldn't help but turn red. Obviously, Ding Meng had guessed his thoughts correctly. Chu Shaoqing looked at all this in shock. She couldn't believe that this was real. Now she finally understood why Ding Meng had asked such a strange question. "Are you sure?" The hidden meaning of this question was, if you are really sure to save these people, then you will see the cruel truth. Ding Ming's gaze fell on Long Ming again. The aquamarine armor isn't something that the claws of underwater monsters can easily penetrate. I've been wondering why Randy was poisoned for no reason. If it weren't for you, he wouldn't have been poisoned. I'm also curious. How did she manage to bribe you? He didn't wait for Long Ming to answer and continued. Since Sadler's brother was able to invite Lei Bao to the Leaston Academy, then naturally, he would have investigated everyone who knew me thoroughly. After they investigated Miss Chu, you must have entered their sights as well. You should have been bribed by them at that time. That's why I said that there might be 1 or 2 spies in our team. Otherwise, a lot of things wouldn't make sense, and you wouldn't have exposed yourself so blatantly. The last part of his words was obviously for Xiao Qiu to hear. Xiao Qiu couldn't laugh this time. Instead, he sighed and said, "Although you didn't get it right, it's close. I didn't expect you to have such a good eye." Xiao Ai's voice suddenly sounded, and her tone became serious. I don't know what method she used, but the energy waves of the energy carrier have been weakening. If this continues, the energy carrier will completely stop moving in 10 minutes. Ding Ming immediately raised his guard. What will the consequences be? Xiao Ai replied. The consequences will be very serious. Once the energy waves of the energy carrier stop moving, all the creatures underground will be awakened from their deep slumber. When that happens, all the monsters will come out in search of food. Little Rascal couldn't help but scold. Why didn't you say so earlier? Xiao Ai said, You didn't ask me. Why should I tell you? Little Rascal said angrily, Your core system's warning function is really lacking in a unique way. Xiao Ai's voice was still emotionless. Warning before danger arrives is called a warning. There are no signs of danger just now. So why should I give you a warning? That's not a function that a truly outstanding system should have. Little Rascal was furious. Xiao Ai, you're hopelessly pedantic. You're done for. Ding Ming wasn't in the mood to listen to the two sisters bickering. Without another word, he rushed toward the energy carrier. No matter what, he had to make Xiao Qiu stop. Otherwise, no one here would be able to escape. Chapter 129. As soon as Ding Ming moved, Long Ming and Claws moved as well. Long Ming's move was a killing move, Flame Energy Sky Form. This martial art technique wasn't powerful by itself. It was only considered powerful because it was built on the foundation of Flame Energy Rushing Fist and Penetrating Flame Energy. Long Ming still slid forward and used Penetrating Flame Energy. He had calculated that with Claw's interference, Ding Ming would definitely not take it head-on. Sure enough, when Ding Ming's punch was aimed at his back, he leaped into the air and flipped forward. Long Ming slid forward with his fist, but this time, Claws attacked from behind. His whole body seemed to be surrounded by a thunderstorm as he rushed toward Ding Ming at lightning speed. His punches and kicks were as dense as raindrops. Ding Ming found it difficult to dodge. Fortunately, his body's resistance was strong enough, so he managed to land on the ground. Even so, most of the punches and kicks landed on his back. Countless electric currents ran through his back, and he felt his upper body go numb. As soon as he landed, Long Ming returned from the air in front of him. His whole body had turned fiery red, but he was rushing toward Ding Ming like a bird spreading its wings. The attacks of Flame Energy Sky Form were like that of an eagle swooping down. If you wanted to dodge, you would have to have extremely fast speed or a super high movement technique. If you didn't, you would have to take it head-on. If you took it head-on, you wouldn't be enduring the power of Flame Energy Rushing Fist and Penetrating Flame Energy. It wouldn't be strange if the force of the charge could cut a person in half. Ding Ming had studied this martial art technique when he was at Lister Academy. He knew that the real power of this technique lay in the fact that the moment an origin ability user got close to the opponent, the most important thing was the attack that he or she used. When Long Ming was only 3 meters away from Ding Ming, he suddenly stretched out his hands and attacked Ding Ming's left and right temples with lightning speed. To be honest, if they were not fighting, Ding Ming would have applauded Long Ming's choice. The double wind-piercing ears technique seemed fierce and vicious, but it was an extremely safe method at this time and place. Previously, Long Ming had tested Ding Meng's strength in the Kejia server. He was not arrogant enough to think that his palm could kill Ding Meng. Since he could not kill Ding Meng, as long as he hit Ding Meng, even if Ding Meng did not faint, his brain would suffer from concussion due to the impact. That would be his real opportunity. Unfortunately, just as his palms were about to hit Ding Meng's temples, Long Ming suddenly felt a strong heat coming from the front. Ding Meng raised his hand and slammed the back of his hand outwards. When his palms hit the back of his hand, it was as if he had hit a steel plate. A strong shockwave came back. Not only did Ding Meng not get hit, but Long Ming himself was also sent flying. When Ding Meng blocked Long Ming's attack, Long Ming had used Overlord's mountain crushing force at the same time. It would be strange if Long Ming did not fly. Long Ming somersaulted in the air and landed on the ground. Claudio came again, but this time, a mass of distorted air floated from the side at an incredible speed. Claudio seemed to know how powerful this mass of air was, so he stopped abruptly and retreated. As soon as he retreated, a cold light flashed in the air. It was obviously a sharp blade. If he did not retreat, he would have been hit. The air made a ping sound, as if smoke had dispersed. The real body of the air appeared, and it was indeed in the form of a human. Star Art was holding a short and sharp scythe as she knelt on one knee on the ground. This was the martial art technique Phantom. Its principle was that light element origin energy flowed so fast that it could not be seen with the naked eye. When trained to the fusion realm, one could enter a temporary state of invisibility. It was one of the more powerful light element martial arts. Xingyi's face was full of anger. She scolded, "As men, don't you feel ashamed? You are the scum of the Superconductor Academy." Hearing the words Superconductor Academy, Claudio's anger soared. "Shut up." Xingyi suddenly disappeared with a schwa sound. She turned into a mass of invisible air and floated towards Claudio like a ghost. Electromagnetism and light speed users were not as distinct as thermodynamics and ice. Electromagnetism was more powerful, while light speed users were nimble and quick. Claws didn't care about Xingyi's strength, but Xingyi was very smart. She didn't use Phantom of the Abyss all the time. Instead, she only revealed her true form when she used her hook and sickle to attack. If her attack didn't hit, she would immediately retreat. This way, Claudio did not dare to act rashly. Xingyi's attack was not a threat to him, but how sharp was that sickle? That was not something he dared to test with his body. Seeing that Xingyi was entangled with Claudio, Long Ming had no choice but to grit his teeth and attack again. However, the person in front of him was not Ding Meng. A thick and solid aura pressed down on him, as firm as a mountain. Chu Shaoqing coldly looked at him and sternly said, "Long Ming, don't be stubborn. It's not too late to turn back now." What answered her was a fist, but Chu Shaoqing did not care at all. She allowed Long Ming's fist to land on her shoulder, but at the same time, she kicked Long Ming's waist. Both of their bodies trembled slightly. It was clear that both of them were not weak. This time, it was Long Ming's turn to be shocked. He knew that the quenching system could resist, but the problem was that Chu Shaoqing's kick was also not ordinary. Her kick made his waist ache slightly. He even felt the thermal energy around his waist stagnate. He did not expect Chu Shaoqing's martial arts to be so proficient. Ding Meng finally got his chance. Chu Shaoqing and Xingyi helped him pin down Long Ming and Claudio, while he directly ran towards Xiao Qiu in the middle of the hall. In 6 minutes and 30 seconds, the energy carrier will stop fluctuating. Xiao AI's tone was very serious. Ding Meng took a deep breath, then took a step forward and flew towards the energy carrier. Xiao Qiu's hand was still filled with energy. She did not move in the face of Ding Meng, but a strange smile appeared on her face. Ding Meng instantly felt a large amount of energy erupt from Xiao Qiu's body. Not only did the ice origin energy cause the surrounding temperature to plummet, it also seemed to faintly form an energy field. This energy field seemed to be specifically targeted at Ding Meng. In Ding Meng's vision, Xiao Qiu's body seemed to be distorting and blurring, especially her head. It looked like she had turned into an ice sculpture. Be careful! This time, it was Little Rascal and Xiao AI who shouted at the same time. The ice sculpture suddenly turned her head. Ding Ming discovered that the ice origin energy was flowing towards him like water. It was like a person swimming in an underwater current. The more he swam forward, the more turbulent the current became, and the pressure multiplied. The operation of the 3 origin points in his body was actually being suppressed by this huge flow of ice. Ding Ming was also shocked. This was the energy of the 3 origin points of the Diamond Star secret art. Just who was this Xiao Qiu? For a moment, Ding Ming couldn't care less. He quickly operated the 4th origin point and continued forward. At this moment, a frightening scene appeared. Xiao Qiu's face was still wearing that strange smile when she turned around, but this face was instantly magnified dozens of times, transforming into a strangely distorted, ethereal, and incomparably evil ghost face in midair. It was like wisps of smoke rising from the depths of hell. The smoke eventually transformed into the image of a devil. It was vague and indistinct, and in this spacious hall, it was extremely frightening. Those who had never seen it before would not be able to understand the terrifying feeling it gave off. Ding Ming's mind was shaken, and he actually stopped in his tracks. 2 seconds later, however, the ghost face let out a strange howl that he had never heard before. It was very much like the mournful cry of a woman in her death throes, and it went on and on. This sound was enough to shatter one's liver and guts. At this moment, the ice flow intensified again and directly sent Ding Ming flying backward. The power of this attack was not to be underestimated. Ding Ming's entire body was covered in thin ice, and when he flew backward, he knocked Long Ming and Chu Shaoqing, who were in the middle of a fierce battle, away. He eventually smashed into the wall of the cave, causing a pile of rocks to fall down. Xiao Qiu turned her head and glanced into the distance. She was also a little surprised that Ding Ming was not completely frozen. This guy had hidden his strength very well. At this moment, in Ding Ming's vision, there were countless devils opening their bloody mouths to devour him. He was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. All he could do was lie there and tremble. At this critical moment, Xiao AI suddenly said, "Quickly close your eyes and operate the 5th origin point. Open your telekinetic vision and narrow your vision to a range of 3 meters. Concentrate, calm your mind, and calm your mind." Following Xiao AI's instructions, he closed his eyes and withdrew his telekinetic vision. The various images of demons and ghosts immediately disappeared. Slowly expand your vision, Xiao AI continued to instruct. This time, Ding Ming could clearly see that Xiao Qiu was still standing in the center of the hall, pouring origin energy into her body. She hadn't even changed her posture. There was no ice sculpture or ghost face at all. The people around him were still fiercely fighting, and it was as if they hadn't noticed the terrifying scene just now. What's going on? Ding Ming really couldn't figure it out. Little Rascal's tone was also very serious. She seems to be using her face to release origin energy. From this, it's clear that her basic cultivation technique starts from her face. She also cultivates telekinesis. Just now, the ice origin energy mixed with telekinetic waves produced a very powerful mental attack. When you charge forward with your naked eyes, without the protection of her telekinetic vision, your opponent's telekinetic energy directly interfered with your brain waves and vision, causing you to hallucinate. Fortunately, you've been diligent in your telekinetic cultivation. Otherwise, you would have become an idiot or a madman. She also cultivates telekinesis? Ding Ming's expression sank. Actually, he had guessed that Xiao Qiu was hiding her true strength, but he never would have imagined that Xiao Qiu had hidden it so deeply. Little Rascal explained, she definitely cultivates it, and her brain development isn't low either. This person is at least an origin energy warrior. If an origin energy user doesn't have a special method to develop their brain and cultivate telekinesis, it will only do more harm than good. Ding Ming, this time, you need to be careful. Xiao AI said, I told you to get rid of her a long time ago. Now, things aren't looking good. In approximately 4 minutes and 20 seconds, the energy vessel will stop fluctuating. Ding Ming said, Then what should I do now? Little Rascal said, Right now, you can only close your eyes and use your telekinetic vision for a long time to fight against her. This will consume a lot of energy, so you need to end the battle quickly. Chapter 130. When Ding Ming walked out of the rubble, Chu Xiaoqing and the others couldn't help but stop fighting and take a few steps back. Everyone looked at Ding Ming in surprise. Not only was Ding Ming walking blindly with his eyes closed, but it was also because an even more powerful aura was being emitted from his body. This was the 5th point of the Diamond Star technique, activated to its limit, and the heat emitted from it completely suppressed the coldness in the hall. In Chu Xiaoqing's perception, with Ding Ming as the center, rings of origin energy fluctuations spread out like waves. When each ring spread to her body, she actually felt a feeling that she hadn't felt for a long time. It was the feeling of shock, awe, and reverence that every ordinary person felt when they first came into contact with origin energy. At this moment, Randy had also recovered. He couldn't participate in the battle, but the detector on the Jade Light armor clearly displayed the Origin Energy Fluctuation Index on his mask. At this moment, his mouth was wide open, and he couldn't be any more shocked. Damn, his combat index is actually as high as 31,222 points. This combat index was different from the test value on the Kujia server, because the latter calculated physical fitness and martial arts. This 31222 points was purely the Origin Energy Index. The Empire's Origin Energy Index certification standards for Origin Ability users were 500 points, Beginner Origin Ability User, 1,200 points, Intermediate Origin Ability User, and 3,000 points, Advanced Origin Ability User. Next was the Origin Energy Index, 8,000 points, Beginner Origin Ability User, 20,000 points, Intermediate Origin Ability User, and 50,000 points, Advanced Origin Ability User. Why was it so difficult for an Origin Ability user to break through to become an Origin Ability user? The most direct reason was reflected in the data. Once you broke through the 3,000 points mark, you would meet the basic requirements to become an Origin Ability user. Note that you only met the requirements, but you didn't truly become an Origin Ability user. By the same logic, an advanced Origin Ability user would face the same principle when advancing to a beginner Origin Ability user. However, there was a huge gap between the two. The reason behind this couldn't be explained in a few words. A 31222 Origin Energy Index meant that Ding Ming's strength was actually that of an intermediate Origin Ability user. Claus was also shocked. He stood in place and muttered to himself, "So this is an Origin Ability user?" The powerful wave was still spreading. Everyone could feel their faces being scraped and burned. Xiao Qiu couldn't help but turn to look at Ding Ming, his eyes full of shock. "Stop him," Xiao Qiu shouted. How could they stop him? This time, Ding Ming didn't even need to use his palm to receive Long Ming's flame energy rushing fist. Long Ming didn't even have time to use his flame energy penetrating force before Ding Ming's hand blade arrived first. After the 5th point of Origin Ability energy was completely activated, Ding Ming's arm was like a red-hot soldering iron. The palm blade would not cut anywhere else but the fist that was coming at him. Wherever the opponent was stronger, he would hit them there. This was the usual strategy of a head-on confrontation. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. Long Ming's expression twisted. He knelt on the ground with one knee. His fist had already loosened, and his hand was hanging limply. It was obvious that his wrist had been broken. Chu Xiaoqing's mouth was wide open. She couldn't believe what was happening in front of her. Even if it had been a day ago, if a student from the Listen Academy had broken Long Ming's wrist in one move, she would have thought that person was dreaming. But now, she felt that the person who was dreaming was herself. Claus stood in place without moving. Now, he didn't dare to move. Ding Ming could make Long Ming kneel in one move. If he went up, he would only kneel even faster. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Star Art's scythe had been quietly launched at some point. It drew an extremely large arc in the air as it shot towards Xiao Qiu. Ding! The scythe seemed to have hit an invisible wall and couldn't move forward. It was only 3 or 4 meters away from Xiao Qiu's face. Chi chi chi, with a light sound, the invisible wall also revealed its true form. It was actually a smooth and thick blue ice wall. This time, Ding Meng didn't need Little Rascal to remind him. He knew that this was Dark Ice Force. This was a very unique martial technique for Ice-type Origin ability users. It was a barrier formed by directly releasing Origin energy. It had a very strong defensive effect and could block most attacks. Strictly speaking, there was no upper limit to this martial technique. Its effectiveness was completely dependent on one's cultivation. Dark Ice Force could normally form a layer of ice to block an enemy's attack. When one cultivated it to the intermediate stage, they could create an ice wall. However, Xiao Qiu's Dark Ice Force was definitely not at the intermediate stage. The ice wall was still growing, as if it had a life of its own. In the blink of an eye, the ice wall had transformed into a hemispherical ice ball that completely enveloped Xiao Qiu and his energy body. It was a deep blue color, and it was clearly at least at the 2nd or 3rd rank of the Melder realm. Xiao AI urged, "Hurry up, we don't have much time left. There's only 3 minutes and 15 seconds left." Xiao Qiu seemed to know that this was the key to success or failure, so he simply used the same trick again. He turned his head and looked at everyone. Origin energy mixed with telekinesis poured out from his face. Chu Shaoqing, Xing Yi, Long Ming, and Claws all collapsed to the ground. They weren't under the control of the ice force field, but rather a mental attack. Chu Shaoqing was rolling on the ground, clutching her head as if she had a splitting headache. Xing Yi was lying on a pile of rocks, covering her eyes and kicking her legs. Claws was still able to stand up after falling to the ground, but his expression was one of terror, as if he had seen countless demons. Long Ming had a foolish expression on his face as he knelt on the ground and laughed foolishly. If it weren't for the fact that Ding Meng had just suffered a great loss, he would have been frightened by these strange phenomena. At this moment, he no longer hesitated. He fiercely opened his eyes, gathered his energy, and sprinted forward. He stomped on the ground, jumped into the air, and faced forward with his shoulders. He put his palms together and fiercely attacked with the Overlord's mountain crumbling energy. There was an earth-shattering boom. The dark blue ball of ice was instantly shattered, ice shards flying in all directions. The power of this collision was no small matter. With the energy body as the center, the granite slabs on the ground were shaken into the air and turned into dust. When the ice and fire collided with each other, the energy waves spread to the periphery and ignited a ring of raging fire. The people on the ground were first wrapped in a layer of ice, and then the ice was melted by the heat wave. The power of the Diamond Star's secret art was evident. This violent explosion finally sent Little Qiu flying. The energy body immediately began to hum, and the water blue color gradually returned to its original color. The energy fluctuations quickly increased by quite a bit. Little Rascal finally praised, "Not bad, not bad. Ding Meng, your collapsing energy has improved greatly recently." Xiao AI said, "I think it's just so. Little Rascal said unhappily, "Can you not be such a killjoy?" Xiao AI said, "What did I say wrong?" His Overlord's mountain crumbling energy didn't even shake the energy body. What's there to praise? Little Rascal argued, "This is an energy body we're talking about. How can martial arts compare to it? Why don't you try and compare yourself to the mainframe system?" Xiao AI said, "Sure, the mainframe system is long gone. If you can restore it, then I'll do it." Little Rascal. Ding Meng still ignored the two of them because his expression was still very cold. His gaze was fixed on the raging fire outside. Xiao Qiu slowly walked in from outside the ring of fire with an expressionless face. A trace of blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth, but judging from the steadiness of her steps, it was clear that she wasn't seriously injured. Xiao Qiu said calmly. I still underestimated you. Ding Ming also stared at her. Me too, Xiao Qiu muttered. Objectively speaking, did I do anything to you along the way? Ding Ming said no. Xiao Qiu said, or should I say, did I directly make a move against you? No. Ding Ming could only answer in this way. In reality, he was the one who initiated the attack. Xiao Qiu was just retaliating. Xiao Qiu said, I didn't threaten you, nor did I threaten you. I also didn't ask you for a price. That's right. Ding Ming understood what she meant. Xiao Qiu didn't threaten or bribe him. She was just using her own method to fight for the energy body. Although this method wasn't very honorable, at least it didn't endanger Ding Ming. Xiao Qiu said, You already have the K virus, and I don't intend to take it from you. Why can't you let me have this energy body? Ding Ming looked around. It's not that I can't let you have it. I'm confident that I can escape, but these people might die here. Xiao Qiu sneered. Are they your friends? Ding Ming said no. Xiao Qiu looked at Chu Xiaoqing, who was lying on the ground in pain. Is she your lover? Ding Ming said no. Xiao Qiu said, Then what does their life or death have to do with you? It doesn't matter, Ding Ming said calmly. But I don't think some people deserve to die. Xiao Qiu asked, So you're saying that some people deserve to die? Ding Ming said, In my eyes, there are only two kinds of people. One is human, and the other is people who think they're human but don't treat others as human. Xiao Qiu immediately understood what Ding Ming meant. He couldn't stand those high and mighty people, especially those who disregarded other people's lives to achieve their goals. In Ding Ming's mind, there were some people who didn't deserve to die. For example, Xiao Si, Lei Bao, Chu Xiaoqing, and Randy, because they didn't do anything wrong. Or rather, what did they do wrong that they had to pay with their lives? Xiao Qiu's tone turned cold. In my eyes, there are only two kinds of people. One is smart, and the other is people who think they're smart. Ding Ming said, Unfortunately, sometimes I don't think I'm smart. Xiao Qiu was silent for a long time before saying, I understand. You're not someone who gives in easily. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived until now. Ding Ming didn't reply. He had seen the shocking changes in Xiao Qiu. Chapter 131. Little Qiu's originally thin and frail body began to grow taller at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its messy hair began to grow longer, turning from brown to black in a single second. The purple mark on the side of its lips began to miraculously disappear. Not only was its face changing shape, but its entire body was also undergoing a complete transformation. It was as magical as a magic trick. 5 seconds later, Xiao Qiu had become a completely different person. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her figure was impressive. She wore a pure green, long-sleeved qipao. Without looking at her face, just her proportions, curves, figure, and clothes were enough to make one's imagination run wild. However, when she saw her face clearly, even Ding Ming, who had always been resolute, was momentarily dazed. This was a flawless face. It could be said that it was an indescribably beautiful face. As long as a man saw this face, it would be difficult for him to shift his gaze away. Jiahua had been the same when she first saw this face. She had practically stopped breathing. This person was none other than Chu Yifeng's right-hand woman on the Sea Heaven's Pole Island, Miss Bing. Little Rascal had already cried out in surprise. Wow, a peerless beauty. Top quality, top quality. Ding Ming, you definitely can't miss this opportunity. No matter what, you have to get your hands on her. It would be too much of a pity to miss this opportunity. Xiao Ai, who had always been solemn and cautious, also expressed her stance. I mean, not bad. Little Rascal's cries were unable to wake Ding Ming from his shock. What truly woke him up was the powerful aura emanating from Miss Bing's body. Up until now, he had only personally seen 2 people with the aura of an expert. One was Chu Xiaoqing's bodyguard, Sister Zhong, and the other was Colonel Feng of the military. Although Miss Bing's aura couldn't compare to those two, it was still quite exaggerated. At the very least, It was a power that Ding Ming had never seen before. She's a biochemical and ice origin ability user. Little rascal finally calmed down. No wonder I felt that her origin energy was coming from her face. It turns out that she's cultivated a cultivation technique that allows her to retain her looks. Ding Ming was also aware of this. The main purpose of the cultivation method was to change one's appearance and disguise oneself quickly. It focused on healthcare, beauty, transformation, and concealment. It was a non-combat cultivation method, and its overall power was not strong. Of course, to say that it wasn't strong was just a layman's word. Cultivation techniques depended on who was using them. No matter how trashy a cultivation technique was, in the hands of an expert, it could still play a powerful role. No matter how much Ding Ming thought about it, he would never have imagined that the real Xiao Qiu would look like this. Not only did she hide her strength, but she also hid her true face. She really hid it well. At this moment, a burst of silly laughter came from the side. Turning around, it was actually Long Ming who was standing in the distance and looking at Miss Bing with an even more exaggerated expression. Ding Ming pondered and said, "I was wondering. Long Ming is not weak, his conditions are not bad, and his future is not bad. The only thing that can make him change his mind is not money. So this is how you bribed him?" Miss Bing said, "It wasn't difficult. I just went to the restaurant outside your school and sat for a while before I negotiated the terms with him." Ding Ming sighed and said, "Bribing Claudio was naturally even easier. You didn't even need to reveal your true face." How could Claudio, who was standing in the distance, say anything? The illusion in his vision had not completely disappeared. At this moment, when he saw Miss Bing's true face, his expression was no different from Long Ming's. "Then what about Lei Bao? How did you fool them?" Ding Ming turned his head and asked. Miss Bing coldly said, "You shouldn't even ask this kind of question." Ding Ming said, "You're not a member of the surprise mercenary group." Miss Bing's face was cold, and she did not reply. Because the surprise mercenary group definitely can't afford to raise an origin ability user like you. Ding Ming pondered and said, "I know that someone hired the surprise mercenary group to help them build the black gold base and excavate the cave virus. So, you should be someone who hired them." Miss Bing said, "You don't look like someone who isn't smart." Ding Ming said, "I also know that if I ask you who you are, you definitely won't tell me." Miss Bing stared at him and said, "I can tell you. My name is Lan Bing." "Lan Bing?" Ding Ming frowned. He did not understand what she meant. Miss Bing nodded. "Very few people know my name. The reason I made an exception this time is not because of you." Ding Ming did not understand. "Then why are you doing this?" Naturally, Lan Bing would not tell him that the real reason was because of Old You. During the 10 days she had disguised herself and infiltrated planet TT-12, she had acted cold and heartless, but Old You did not dislike her because of this. Instead, he took good care of her. Rather than saying that he took care of her, it was more accurate to say that it was because Old You did not know anything and had nothing. Without strength, he was naturally not a threat. From this, it could be seen that the saying, "those who live in the dark are blessed," was not wrong at all. Lan Bing said coldly, "I'll ask you something right now." Ding Ming stared at her. "What is it?" Lan Bing said word by word, "This energy body. Do I have a right to take it away?" Ding Ming replied without hesitation, "Absolutely." Lan Bing said, "Then why don't you move aside?" Ding Ming replied coldly, "It's one thing for you to be qualified, but it's another thing for you to pay the price." Lan Bing snorted disdainfully. "It seems that sometimes you really aren't smart enough." As soon as she said this, Ding Ming suddenly felt that the air around him had become strangely cold. If even a thermodynamic origin ability user like him felt cold, then it was easy to imagine the situation of the others. When he turned around, he saw that Xing Yi, who was lying on the ground, had already turned into an ice sculpture. Chu Xiaoqing was leaning against the wall, her entire body emitting a white mist. Long Ming and Claws had already been wrapped in a thin layer of ice and were standing motionless. Randy was either too far away or too lucky, but he had not been affected by the ice energy. However, he had also collapsed on the ground, seemingly unconscious. It was only now that Ding Meng realized that he had fallen for Lan Bing's dirty trick. Snow began to fall like goose feathers in the hall, and white streams of air began to swirl in the air. Clearly, Lan Bing had secretly used some strange technique while they were talking. From Ding Meng's perspective, Lan Bing was like a goddess of ice and snow in the distance. She looked so beautiful and moving, but the temperature was still dropping. The snow was getting heavier and heavier, and the streams of air were getting thicker and thicker. In the blink of an eye, the hall had turned into a world of ice and snow. The goddess was like a god of death. "Look out! It's the winter ice dust storm," Little Rascal cried out in surprise. "Look at this level. She's probably not just a melder." Indeed, it was not just that. Ding Meng noticed that snow was rapidly rising from the ground. The surface of the snow was faintly blue, and the blue light began to spread for his boots to his ankles, calves, thighs, and waist. Everywhere the blue light passed, it froze. Most importantly, the layer of ice was rapidly thickening. Not good. Ding Meng could also sense that the circulation of his blood and origin energy was weakening as the layer of ice thickened. Lan Bing was deliberately freezing everyone to death here. There was a crisp tinkling sound, followed by the sound of ice shattering. The golden diamond mirror image finally covered Ding Meng's body. His diamond astral art had activated its strongest defense. Lan Bing wasn't surprised. She had already seen Ding Meng use this move in his battle with Salazar on planet TT-12. She slowly raised her right hand, her slender fingers curling into claws and twisting them in the air. All of the wind and snow in the hall rushed toward Ding Meng from all directions. The blue layer of ice formed once more, creaking and spreading across the surface of the diamond mirror image. This was a true suppression of strength. The diamond mirror image slowly lost its luster, and the golden hue darkened until it was completely covered in ice. It looked like an ice sculpture. Lan Bing was the sculptor, and her hand was the knife. She was now carving Ding Meng into a lifeless statue. However, just as the head of the statue was about to be frozen, Ding Meng's hands suddenly pierced through the ice and pushed to the sides. There was another earth-shattering explosion. The mountain-crushing overlord's force shattered all of the ice. This time, even the snow under Ding Meng's feet and the stone slabs under the snow disappeared without a trace. Ding Meng was standing in a shallow pit. The diamond mirror image reappeared and covered his body, still glowing with a golden light. Lan Bing raised her head in surprise. Ding Meng's foundation had once again exceeded her expectations. Salazar couldn't do anything to the diamond mirror image back then because he relied on his wrist blade to deal damage. If the winter storm, which relied purely on origin energy, couldn't trap Ding Meng, then it proved that Ding Meng's cultivation method was most likely a 5-star one. It's the same for 5-star cultivation method. Lan Bing suddenly clasped her hands together in front of her chest. Then, she slowly separated them to form claws, as if she was holding onto an invisible ball of energy. However, a spherical layer of ice suddenly appeared around Ding Meng, surrounding him in the center. As Lan Bing twisted her claws, the layer of ice crackled and thickened. In the blink of an eye, it had solidified into a large ice ball 5 meters in diameter. Just by looking at the purplish-blue surface of the ice ball, one could tell that the dark ice force she was using this time was more than twice as powerful as when she was defending herself. Little Rascal couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This beauty's ice origin energy is so powerful. Xiao AI also began to call the police. Her origin energy index has already broken through 35,000 points. ACT 5570, hurry up and think of a solution, or you'll be in danger of being frozen. Ding Meng had long since sensed that this ice ball was completely different from the previous one. The ice ball that Lan Bing had solidified earlier was pure ice. It was dead, but this ice ball seemed to be alive. Not only did it form an even more solid ice, but countless amounts of ice origin energy also corroded the surface of the diamond mirror image like a tidal wave. Although the surface of the diamond mirror image hadn't broken yet, Ding Ming could sense that the Origin's rotation had slowed down yet again. It looked like it was going to stop at any moment. Once the Origin stopped rotating, the diamond mirror image would shatter completely. At that time, he would have no choice but to use his physical body to withstand the ice energy. He had no doubt that Lan Bing could freeze him into a block of ice. Ding! A part of the mirror on the lower left side of Ding Meng's body shattered. Sharp and cold energy whistled through the air, immediately paralyzing half of his body. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.